Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 7th. You are now joining us with the New Mexico State Game Commission and the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. This meeting is hereby called to order. So, Mr. Director Mike Sloan, we have a wonderful packed agenda, items 1 through 13, and I would love if we could proceed into the first order of business, a roll call.
Of course, Madam Chair. Commissioner Salazar, Henry. Excuse me.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez is excused. Commissioner Kramer.
Present.
Commissioner Bates.
Here.
Vice Chair Vesbach.
I'm here.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Director Mike Sloan. The next order of business is the approval of this agenda. It has been posted on the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish website, and many of you have seen that, but commissioners, I respectfully request a slight modification to this agenda. I would like to add, immediately following the approval of the agenda, an action item. We don't have to number it and change the numbering of the current listing, but I'd like to add a discussion. The agenda item would be the late Commissioner David Souls. What I would like to do is open it up for discussion. And then I would like a motion. I have a motion prepared. So if I may, commissioners, would you be willing to consider that adjustment to the modification of our agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Bates. Director, can you please take a vote?
This is on approval of the agenda as modified, correct?
Correct.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vesbach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Director. Commissioners, Department of Game and Fish, and members of the public who are here today. I would like to see an honor of the late Commissioner David Souls. There has been such an outpouring of respect and honor to such a great man that had given so much of his life to wildlife, to conservation, to hunting, to the sports and activities of our great state and our country. And with all of that outpouring, I would like to recommend, or at least have some discussion of how we could honor him, and possibly maybe at our next meeting in May, we could have possibly a good friend of his, and I'm looking to Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry, possibly spearheading and working with the department, a means of honoring the late David Souls, our commissioner. I think that there have been traditions in the past to honor certain retirees, but he's not a retiree. He did not work with the Department of Game and Fish. But I think it would be very nice if we could have possibly something in May with the Department of Game and Fish and the Commission, and maybe a representative of his family present, so that we could definitely extend the honor to him. I'm always overwhelmed with the tremendous work that EMTs, firefighters, law enforcement, but the medical profession in general, what they do to support, and I know there was so much of that for our late commissioner. And so I would also want to somehow acknowledge all of that as part of the May presentation. So that's my thought. Commissioners, what do you think?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I think-
Commissioner Gill.
yeah. I think it would be a lovely tribute, and I definitely vote in favor of whatever Roberta or the committee comes up with. It would be wonderful.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
I really appreciate your forethought and your thoughtfulness. And I think there's a good way to honor David, both through us. I know the department didn't get to know him as long as some of us. And I think it's important that we find a way to honor him. We've been able to meet with one of his sons and just go over some stuff and see about where the family is in this whole grieving process. And I think a May tribute, if we are all in person or able to be in person, would be perfect. And I would invite any other commissioner that wants to sit and talk about how we can do this. It doesn't just have to be me, but there are some great traditions that the game department has had for all the way back to before I started working and honoring commissioners, and especially commissioners that have passed. So I look forward to going back and looking at those and hopefully finding a good way for Nancy and Kevin and Keith to remember fondly of the time he gave. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think that's a wonderful extension out to the commission. I need not remind you of the Open Meetings Act and how you proceed. You can certainly tap into each of them as needed. I'm not sure we have to form a committee. You are a very productive, powerful person in terms of your productivity and your strategic operation. So yay, verily. Any other commissioners before I make the final motion and get a second and then take a vote? Very good. Okay.
Sorry, Chair Salazar.
Henry,
I was
yeah.
thinking that it may not be exactly a motion and a vote. This could be a direction by the board to, both members of the commission and members of Department of Game and Fish for this to happen, because I do know it was not on the original agenda, and I think this is just a direction as to how the commission and the Department of Game and Fish provide this commemoration or honorarium or memoriam for former Commissioner
That's
David.
fine.
Okay.
Earlier in the discussion and on the record, I did say that I was going to make this a discussion and action item. And if you're advising me not to make it an action item, then I won't do it. It may just be a semantics, whether the words are emotion or action or direction. I don't care. I really don't. At the end of the day, what I would like to see is May 22nd, an agenda item. And before that agenda item, Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry will come forward after having worked with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish and members of the community, and more importantly, the late David Souls family, in paying tribute to him at our May meeting. So that was my motion, but that is my also direction. And if I can have a general consensus, Vice Chair Jeremy, do you, is that okay?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'd love to help if Commissioner Salazar Henry would like to have that help.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Jimmy Bates?
100% on board.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Kramer?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. And Commissioner Salazar Henry?
Yes, ma'am. I'll do a good job. Count on it.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so then let's move on to the next agenda item. We are on agenda item on the draft, number 4, which is general public comments. Mr. Lance Cherry, do we have any members of the public ready to speak?
Madam Chair, no one has raised their hand yet, but I just pushed the message through. So if you give them just a second to chime in. And we do have our first person, which is Dara Parker.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Dara Parker. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm well, and I hope you all are well also. I wanted to comment today for 2 purposes. Madam Chair, you've already addressed my first purpose, which they're really hard. Oh goodness, I'm so sorry. Was to honor David Souls and express my condolences. My goodness, I thought I could keep it together. I know he was a dear friend of many of you, as he was of mine. His loss is certainly tremendous, and I wanted to acknowledge his tireless commitment to conservation of natural and cultural resources, public land access, and of course, hunting and fishing and wildlife more broadly. His work helped to bring the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument to life, both literally and figuratively. And he represented so many through his work on the commission and involvement in DACUS and frankly, many other groups and efforts. I'm really grateful for the tremendous impact he's had on New Mexico, the truly kind, patient, curious and adventurous person that he was, and his generosity of time and spirit. So this short tribute doesn't do justice to David at all. And I want to sincerely thank the commission and you, Madam Chair, for discussing how to do that better. The second item I wanted to chat briefly about was to also thank the department for issuing a press release recently on the presence of zebra mussels in aquarium mossballs, an issue that actually David and I had discussed just a few weeks ago. Zebra mussels, as you all know, have caused billions of dollars in damage to boats and dam, irrigation, electric, and other infrastructure across the country, not to mention the severe ecological damage that it brings. Any release into a waterway directly or indirectly can cause a very serious situation. So I wanted to offer my support for anything the department can do to continue spreading the word about zebra mussels, particularly in communities with storm drains, to ensure that the public is well educated. This new vector that we've discovered involves regular folks who may or may not have prior awareness of the risks. They may not have experienced checks for invasive species at, boat docks or, other kinds of things. So, I'm also really glad that the department and other agencies like Fish and Wildlife Service are working to track down the sellers and remove them from circulation. I request that the department keep the public updated on the risk and what we can do to help. I don't know if this is appropriate, but I stand to assist if that's helpful to the department or the commission as well. And I also wanted to just share something that I didn't see in the report, but in case there are members of the public listening today, the USGS also has a website through which you can report potential sightings of invasive aquatic species. And the easiest way to do that is just to Google USGS NAS report, and then it comes right up. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dara Parker. That was wonderful. That was very beautiful. Lance Cherry, do we have someone else?
Next up is Joseph Rivera.
Good morning, Joseph Rivera. How are you?
Unmute.
Good morning. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good
Wonderful.
morning.
Thanks for allowing me to come in and have a little bit of time to say. I have been working with Gail Kramer. This is Joseph Rivera calling from the city of Champions here in Artesia. I'm a lifelong hunter in Unit 34. That's the Mayhill, Cloudcroft, Tiburon, Pinon area. We've got an issue that I've noticed over the last handful of years or so with the mule deer population has plummeted in terrible numbers. There are some areas where the deer, I hate to use this word.
Excuse me, Mr. Rivera. I do not mean to be rude. My apologies for interrupting you.
Okay.
But Mr. Cherry, on my end, there's a very bad
I'm
connection.
sorry.
Mr. Rivera, you probably have the speaker playing in the background. If you could
No.
mute that.
I logged in with my phone. I disconnected. Can you folks hear me? I'm sorry.
Much better. Thank
I
you.
just wanted to make sure I got to speak today is all, but it's off now. But
Okay.
the problem that I just sent a proposal to Gail on email, and if you folks want that, Gail, you're more than welcome to forward that on to all of them. It's a proposal to break up Unit 34 like how we did in 15 and 16, 15A, 15B, so forth. I want to do 34A, B, C, and D. Gail recommended 3. I guess that's something we could take a look at. The problem is from Mayhill south to Pinon, back around to Penasco, back up to Mayhill, the mule deer population has plummeted over here. For the last 5 years or so, all 365 days out of the year, back in the old days, we used to see all the mule deer and full grown mature bucks you would want to see. Now you're lucky to go in there. In 2018 in all 4 hunts, we saw 18 mule deer and 1 buck. In 2019, we saw 18 mule deer and 1 buck. Last year, we managed to see 4 bucks. 3 of them were just too small. They were way back in there. There was one about 15, 16, 17 inches wide, and he just wasn't worth it. And so when you see 50, 60 deer in 3 or 4 years of hunting, that's a problem. The main problem is the elk are just overwhelmed this place. I mean, they're destroying everything because they don't have the vegetation in the high country that they run into in the high open mountains. And on those ridges, it is very clear, folks, that the elk have overrun the mule deer. You don't see the deer or the elk cohabitating anymore. The mule deer population is in a dire situation. And so I think we need to break up Unit 34 on the east side and open up the elk tags. I think we need to reduce the mule deer tags for a little while. I'm promoting a New Mexico mule deer recovery program because there's a lot of what I want everybody to know the most is when we go scouting, you just don't see deer anymore. They've gone extinct in a lot of areas over here, and all you see are just herds and herds and herds and herds of elks. I mean, just there's a lot of elk. And so I'm kind of concerned, about the mule deer count in Unit 34. If we're not seeing deer, I don't know how anybody can see deer in a helicopter flying above it. I don't know how you count deer in the forest, or elk or deer in the forest. And so we'd like to be on the ground and be there when they're gathering that data. We're wondering how many people that live in the high country in Unit 34 are getting tags, how many of them are reported successful hunts. And so that can't justify the east and the west. I'm sure there's a healthy population up high, but down on the east side in that high open country, there's a serious problem down here. And I'm kind of concerned with this rock seat law, what may happen in 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, and so I appreciate my time.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. That was wonderful.
Okay.
Lance Cherry, do we have anyone else ready to speak?
Madam Chair, that is only folks who raised their hand this morning.
Thank you, sir. Well, then let's proceed on to our next agenda item, item number 5 on our published agenda. This is the consent agenda. There are 4 action items. Approval of the minutes from our March 22nd, 2021 virtual special meeting. 2, approval of license revocations. C, approval of Operation Phoenix Outdoors as a nonprofit to receive donated licenses. And D, or 4, reserving 2 elk licenses for the nonprofit wish granting organizations. These are action items, and typically we can, as a consent agenda, we can move right into a vote, or if there is some question or some discussion that the commissioners would like to have. I start with you, Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, I do not have any further comments. I'd be prepared to move into motions, but would open that up to the rest of the commission as well.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
I just want to compliment Colonel Griego and the field staff, the game wardens, the conservation officers, for taking to heart some of the comments I've been making over the last year about looking at egregious and flagrant violations differently than they've been in the past and allowing more discretion. They understand what's going on in the field. They work those investigations and they get a feel for whether this was something somebody's going to learn from with a not so serious revocation period versus somebody who is just not getting it. And so I really appreciate all the information that Colonel Griego and his officers provided and have taken to heart some of my comments. And I am very pleased to see that they're moving forward with some assurance that the Game Commission is going to support them. So Colonel Griego, thank you to you and your officers for really working at this go round. That's all, Madam Chair. And I'd be happy to second any motion.
Thank you. I echo your sentiments, and I know every member of the commission feels the same way. The honor and the respect that I have, I'm just honored to be with and work with Colonel Griego. He does a phenomenal job, and the entire law enforcement crew of the Department of Game and Fish. I'm always so impressed and honored. So thank you for your beautiful words, Commissioner. So that was a motion. Do I have a second?
I believe.
Madam Chair, I think we need motions on each of the agenda items, but I would move first to approve the minutes on in item 5A.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Director Sloan, can we have a, please?
Madam Chair, if you'd prefer, I think you could do a motion on all of them.
I thought you could.
Okay. I'm happy to go one by one if you'd like.
Let's do it all.
So your motion is to approve the entire consent agenda, items A through D?
Yes, I'd move to approve the consent agenda 5A through 5D.
I'll second that.
Okay, wonderful. Same motion from a new motion from Vice Chair and a second from Commissioner Kramer. And this is to approve all the consent agenda items A through D. Director, can we please have a vote?
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vesbach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Beautiful. Director, agenda item number 6 is where the commissioner would love to hear your report, an overview of all the activities since our last meeting, including an update on the 2021 legislative session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As was noted earlier, we have the sudden and unexpected loss of Commissioner David Souls. Commissioner Souls was actively engaged in everything across the entire agency, from wolves to hunter access to non-game and habitat management. His keen questioning and thoughtful approach will be missed by everyone. Along the lines of additional people issues, well, not issues, but comment. We've had 3 significant retirements since the year began. Russ Benjamin, our construction project manager, in his short 7 years and 2-month career, built 2 new office buildings, our shop complex here in Santa Fe, ensured dam compliance, and kept all the existing facilities up and running. So those are big shoes to fill. Vince Olguin, our budget analyst, was one of the unheralded folks back in our ASD section, without whom no capital project or budget adjustment request would have occurred. Millions of dollars flowed across Vince's desk in his 12 years and 2 months with the agency. And then finally, another big set of shoes to fill. Assistant Director Jim Cummins closes out his career after 24 years and 4 months of service to the sportsmen and women of New Mexico. Jim began as a district officer in Cuba, quickly promoted to be one of the first investigators that the department had in Raton. He rose up to lead the investigative team in Albuquerque and finished his career as the assistant director of the resource divisions. Jim's been involved in many aspects of the agency and will be missed for his attention to detail and willingness to dive into any project. So those are 3 pretty important positions and people, and we really appreciate the time and energy that they've devoted to the agency. As for the legislature, you know, they met twice. Once had a number of bills that related to the agency, most of which you know, had committee hearings, but didn't really move beyond the committee hearing stage. It does appear that our budget and our capital request will pass through as we had originally requested them, plus a little bit of extra capital money for the Sykes Act fund. The significant bill is the SB 32, which will affect where legal trapping can occur on the landscape. It narrowly passed through the Senate and the House and was signed by the governor just on Monday. You know, talking specifically about sort of the agency and the activities we've undertaken, there are far too many to sort of highlight every one of them. We've had, you know, a big effort across the agency in a lot of areas, but I'll do my best to try and touch on a few from each division. You know, importantly, our IT and I&E division, along with other folks, set a new record in accepting applicants and applications for the draw hunts this year. We did this while, you know, instituting a remote phone system, ensuring PCI or credit card compliance and security. We're seeing a significant increase in interest in outdoor activities, including hunting and fishing, and that's reflected, I think, in the number of applicants we received this year. Our ASD section continues to ensure compliance with all of our federal grants, bring in federal reimbursement and oversee the draw, as well as gearing up for the budget development cycle and instituting the new budget for the next fiscal year. Ecological and environmental planning continues to work with the New Mexico Department of Transportation to develop the wildlife corridors plan. There's some ground truthing going on about that to ensure that that really is what the computers tell us it is. And so I expect there'll be some public meetings in the next month or two before that plan is actually finalized. They're also leading our engagement as a cooperating agency in the SunZia transmission line. That is a line that's going to run from sort of Willard and out that way down to the Rio Grande and south across to Arizona. Lots going on there and lots of alternatives to be analyzed, so that they're working hard on that. Our IT division continues to ensure our systems function so we can have meetings like this. Also hard at work updating our code to ensure that we are up to date and secure, as well as all state agencies are moving to a cloud-based Microsoft 360. So that's a big transition that's, I think, going to be a little bit challenging to do remotely, but our IT folks are up to it. Mm-hmm. Field operations, as you'll hear later in the meeting, has been busy with court appearances, working with the state land office on access points, as well as installing a gate to further hunter access in a place that's been blocked off for quite a while. Completing unitization agreements with the state land office to open up more land for hunting and fishing. patrolling oryx, Barbary sheep, waterfowl, and the other array of hunts, all while preparing to expect depredation issues exacerbated by the drought this year. So we really do anticipate that as those fields that are going to be irrigated green up and there isn't much in the forest, we're going to see deer and elk on those fields. And so our folks are going to have to address that. The Fisheries Management Division is nearing completion of the River Ranch Pond, which is a major step in meeting the criteria to delist the Chihuahua chub. In the Mimbres drainage, the Glenwood hatchery renovation contract should be in place in the next couple of weeks, with work starting very shortly thereafter. And the FMD has also undertaken the annual walleye spawn. We missed that last year because of COVID, but we were able to figure out how to get it done this year. Finally, the Wildlife Management Division captured a total of 173 animals, 15 pronghorn, 92 elk, and 66 deer, and fitted them with GPS collars as part of the effort to evaluate migratory herds in the north central region. That's part of the secretarial order put out by the Interior Department to look at migration corridors, and we focused on those larger herds in the north central that we know are moving between here and Colorado. Thousands of cottonwoods and other riparian plants were planted along the Canadian River as part of a collaborative program with the State Land Office, as well as plantings at Bernardo and Huey wildlife management areas. The annual wolf count was conducted at the end of January and the 1st of February, finding a minimum of 186 wolves, with 114 in New Mexico and 72 in Arizona. This year's survey represents not only an all-time record of number of wolves in the wild, but also the most ever breeding pairs, wild packs, pups born in the wild, and pups surviving to the end of the year. And I think we can base a lot of that on the hard work that we've done with cross-fostering. And with that, Madam Chair, I conclude my presentation.
Wow, Director Sloan, that is just amazing. Again, kudos to you, to the department, to and all that you collaborate and partner with. That is just phenomenal with what you did. If you wouldn't mind, repeat those annual wolf counts again. That you, I didn't
Sure.
get them all, and I'd like to jot them down.
Okay.
There's
a minimum of 186 wolves. So they fly the survey and count the number of wolves they see. So that doesn't necessarily represent all of them. So it's 186. There are 114 in New Mexico and 72 in Arizona.
okay, perfect.
We're just about to start into the cross-fostering period as we did last year, and hopefully we'll have equal or better success this year than we did last year.
Awesome. Commissioners, do any of you have any questions for the director?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Salazar Henry.
I guess I'd like to start off with some comments about the budget and the additional capital outlay money. I don't know if our sportsmen know and sportswomen, those that are contributing to the Habitat Stamp Fund, but the governor and her staff, the Senate Finance New Committee Chair, Senator Munoz, DFA and LFC, all supported a request to add $2.5 million into the capital outlay project budget to support fish habitat stream restoration projects. I want to thank the members of the Finance Committee for listening to the members of the public during the Habitat Stamp discussion. When we renewed that, there was a huge concern or comments that were being made about a growing cash balance. And I know, Madam Chair, I spoke to you. You also supported this. The director went to the appropriate people to make sure all the approvals happened. So it was a team effort between the commission, subcommittees, the public, our sportsmen and women who want to see this money that they're paying for, put it in the ground. And I just can't say enough about the governor and her staff for really coming through and understanding the nuances of the department's budget, their funding sources. I think they've just done an outstanding job in trying to really support the department. So I want to let everybody know there's going to be some money put on the ground for fish stream habitat work that has not traditionally come from the Sykes Act Fund. And I'm hoping that the new Habitat Stamp Committee that'll be looking at projects will really look at areas where there's high use areas, high trafficked areas where we can better improve the habitat in those areas. So folks will be, our anglers will be a little more satisfied with some of the closer areas to these high urban traffic areas where they'll be able to go and fish just as well as not having to make the trip all the way up to the Rio Castillo or any other place. The other thing I want to say is I appreciate the directors sending the law enforcement, the NACLEC report on conservation officers. I thought that was so informative. I was not surprised at all by the findings. And again, the differences between urban and rural interactions with conservation officers. But it has some good things in there that I think the department can move forward with in trying to get a little more information out about the conservation officers in this state. That has always been a problem. We have always known that in the Game and Fish Department, that the only people that really know what the Game and Fish Department does and are the people that interact with them most, the license buyers. And so I'm hoping that there's some things the department can put into place. The other report, the hunting during the pandemic across the country, was also interesting. I think I'd read something somewhere else about that. But I guess most of this, I just wanted to say thank you to the director for that. But I think those two reports ought to be placed on our website so people can read them, look at them, understand a few things. I think anything like that is good to add to. I know if Commissioner Souls was here, he would already dug into that, and he would have 20 million questions and ideas on how to make use of that report. So that's one of the things I will miss. But I just wanted to ask that be placed there. There is so much information that can be gotten on our website, and I just keep moving people towards there. Especially the economic survey that's on the 2013 report. These can be in there as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing that updated report, the 2021 or 2020, whatever they're calling it. So those are my comments about the director's report at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Henry. Any other commissioners, comments, thoughts? All right, well, let's move on to the next agenda item. That was very wonderful. Okay, a director, the next agenda item is for you again. It is the Citizens Advisory Committee. It is an action and discussion item, so please open it up with some information for the commissioners and the members of our general public.
Madam Chair, as you know, the commission adopted a new rule last year sometime, which created a 9-member citizen advisory committee for the Sykes Act. That advisory committee was to reflect the representation on the commission in terms of districts and conservation interests and landowner interests. When we brought you a list, I guess in January, you appointed members. When we went through and reviewed that list, we determined that there was one member that did not meet the representation requirements. So we needed to bring forward a different person to match that representation requirement. The individual, Charles Hibner, was on our original recommendation list, and that's who we would propose to take the landowner position on the committee.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions before we move into a motion? No comments. Okay. Okay, Vice Chair, do you want to take a motion or do the motion?
Sure, I would move to appoint Charles Hibner of Rio Arriba County to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bates. I love it. Okay, Director Sloan, let's move forward with a vote.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bessbach,
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, sir. This is just wonderful. I look forward to the next set of discussion items. Cliff, from the U.S., let's see, help me with the pronunciation of your last name. Schlussner? I don't hear you.
You're on mute, Cliff.
You're still on mute.
There we go.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can. Please, sir, pronounce your last name.
Sluisner.
Sluisner. Beautiful. It's a wonderful last name. So today, with your presentation, we look forward to hearing about the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the overview of the Wildlife and Sports Fish Restoration Program and the State Wildlife Grant Program. It is wonderful to have you here, sir, and take it away.
All right. I'll try to share my screen here.
Okay.
Hold on one second. All right. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Let me get started. Good afternoon. My name's Cliff Sluisner. Mike Sloan had asked me to put together a presentation for you on funding through the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program. So it's kind of a complicated system, but we'll work through it as best we can in the time we've got allowed. First, I'll cover what funding's available for the New Mexico Game and Fish Department this year. Then I'll explain where the money comes from and how the national funds get divided up. Then we'll cover some unique features about the funding and some of the congressional intent that drives the program. And at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So the numbers on this slide represent the dollars apportioned and available to the New Mexico Game and Fish Department in fiscal year 2021. We'll go through the abbreviations. The WR is wildlife restoration. There's 12 million available. BHE is basic hunter education, and there's 1.3 million available in that funding pot. EHE is enhanced hunter ed, and there's 80,000 in that pot. And SFR is sport fish restoration, and there's 7.3 million available this year. And SWG is the State Wildlife Grant Program, and there's 2.5 million available in that pot. So this is a busy slide. This slide covers where the money comes from and how it gets divided up before it comes to New Mexico. And it starts with the Wildlife Restoration Act, enacted in 1937. It established 3 sources of funding, and you see them at the top. It's commonly referred to as a Wildlife Restoration Trust Fund, and it's an 11% tax on firearms and ammunition, 10% tax on pistols, and 11% tax on bows, collected by the Department of the Treasury going into the Wildlife Restoration Trust Fund. The interest on the trust fund goes into the North American, see that on the left, the North American Conservation Fund, used to acquire land for national wildlife refuges. But before the Wildlife Restoration Trust Fund is divided among the 50 states and 6 territories, it has 5 initial deductions. The WISFR administration is the first one. The 2001 Improvement Act capped the funding for the administration of the program nationally at 8.2 million. So that gets taken out. The traditional multi-state conservation grant program takes 3 million that's divided out through AFWA. The R3 multi-conservation grant program established under the PR Modernization Act, that just happened, takes another 5 million, and that gets distributed through AFWA. That enhanced hunter ed program, that 80,000 that New Mexico gets taken out, and that's 8 million every year. And then basic hunter education takes half of the taxes collected on revolvers, bows, arrows, and broadheads, and goes into the basic hunter education pot, and that gets apportioned out to the states. So the remaining balance is apportioned out to the 50 states and 6 territories through the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program annually. So that's kind of where it comes from. So how you guys, it's decided, how much money you get. It's apportioned to the states based on formulas. So we'll go through the formulas here. The formulas for basic hunter ed and enhanced hunter ed is based on the state's population compared to the US population, with no state receiving less than 1% or more than 3%. So New Mexico's small population compared to the US population keeps your apportionment at the low end for those funds. That's why you don't get a lot of enhanced hunter ed money. The formula for the wildlife restoration is based on the size of the state and the number of hunting licenses sold in the state. And again, no state receives less than 0.5% or more than 5%. So New Mexico, being a large state, helps you guys with your wildlife restoration apportionment. So for the other side of the house, the Federal Aid Sport Fish Restoration Act was established in 1950, and it created the Sport Fish Restoration Trust Fund, which is comprised of taxes collected on fishing equipment, import fees on yachts, and largely the money comes from motorboat and small engine fuels. And that addition was added in 1985, and that was a huge boon to the funding. So the Sport Fish and Restoration and Boating Trust Fund has 4 initial deductions. So again, the funds used to administer the program, and the 2001 Improvement Act capped that at 8.2 million. So that goes to the WSFR program for administration costs. The funding for the Sport Fish and Boating Partnership Council is 400,000. That comes out annually. The fund also supports 4 fishery commissions, taking 800,000 out, and the multi-state conservation grant program takes 3 million off the top. And then the money is further divided into 5 pots, so it's a little more complicated. The Coastal Wetland Planning, Protection, and Restoration Act takes 18.7%. The Coast Guard Boating Safety Program takes 17.3%. And then the Boating Infrastructure and Clean Vessel Act Grant Program takes another 4%. There's a National Outreach Program that takes 2%. And then the Sport Fish Restoration Program is left with 58% of the remaining funds in the account. So then that gets apportioned out to the states based on formulas, and the formula for sport fish restoration is based on the size of the state and the number of sport fishing licenses sold in the state. And no one state receives less than 1% or more than 5%. And again, New Mexico's size helps you guys with your apportionment. So the funding for the state Oh, did I skip a slide? No. So the other pot of money, the SWIG. So the funding for the State Wildlife Grant Program are apportioned annually by Congress. So these aren't collected through taxes. Congress approves this every year. So it's up to Congress to provide that funding. And it's part of the Department of Interior's Appropriation Act. And apportionments are based on the area of the state and population, with no state receiving less than 1% or more than 5%. So that's your state wildlife grant program. Now we're kind of to some of the unique features of the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program. And one of the tenets of the program that's unique is that the program, or in order to participate in the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program, a state must have assent legislation in place that protects the use of these funds. And to satisfy this requirement, the states must have passed legislation for the conservation of fish wildlife, including a prohibition against the diversion of license fees for any purpose other than the administration of the state Fish and Game Department. And this legislation is also the source of authority that our auditors use to audit the state license fees. So New Mexico has just gone through an audit, and that's one of the sources of authority for that, for checking on that. And one of the first things the auditors do check is for any diversion issues in the state. So that's one of the kind of key tenets of the program, is the money has to stay within the control of the Game and Fish Commission. So all funding sources also come with congressional intent, which limits the use of those funds. So it's not just a big pot of money that Mike gets to decide how to, where best to spend it. Each one of those pots has congressional intent tied to it, and it limits the use of the funds. For the wildlife restoration, it's conservation and management of furred and feathered creatures, habitat restoration, land acquisition, the construction of facilities needed to run the department. And additionally, along with this is a 25% non-federal match requirement for every dollar, or every 75, or for every dollar spent, 75% federal, 25% state match. So for basic hunter ed, you've got the same match rate at 75-25. And the congressional intent of this is teaching hunter safety, building, operating, maintaining ranges, and R3 activities with the PR Modernization Act. For enhanced hunter ed, it's teaching enhanced programs, archery education, safety, enhancement to ranges, and R3. And then again, it has the same 75-25% non-federal match. For the Sport Fish Restoration Program, the focus is management, enhancement, and conservation of sport fish population. It also includes aquatic education, research, habitat restoration and enhancement, and providing public access. And this funding also requires a 25% non-federal match. For the SWIG program, it covers the State Wildlife Grant Program. It covers research, habitat management, and monitoring of species identified as species of greatest conservation need in an approved state wildlife action plan. And updating the state wildlife action plan and other issues identified as emerging issues. So the non-federal match rate for the State Wildlife Grant Program is 35%, except for planning grants, which are 25% state match. So any questions? Hopefully that gives you an idea of how we're structured, where the money comes from, some of the unique features, and some of the congressional intent with the funding.
I think that was a wonderful presentation, Cliff. Help me again.
Slusner?
Slusner. Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any questions for Cliff Slusner?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Salazar Henry?
I actually happened to enjoy this presentation, and I think the director knows why. But I spent 17 years in the federal grant program, and as a good chunk of it as coordinator for the game department. So I love the refresher on all this. My big question to Cliff is, what trends are you seeing in the funding sources going into the trust funds? Are they down? Are they up? What are the projections? How are you guys helping the states plan for their budgets into the future with this information?
Well, the big trend in the last, I don't know, 5 years has obviously been the PR bump, is what they call it. There's been a large bump in the sale of firearms and ammunition, and it's resulted in a bump in the funding available for the wildlife restoration program. And everyone has always called it a bump, anticipating that it's going to go down, and so far it hasn't. And that's I think probably one of the, it's a blessing, and it's also probably of concern to Mike, what's it going to be next year, because it's not, traditionally it was pretty stable, and then all of a sudden it just kind of ballooned up, and everyone keeps wondering when it's going to go down or if it's going to go down. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is trying to predict where that fund's going to be in the next year. Sportfish restoration, as you saw on that slide, has a lot of deductions out of that. I think nationally trending states are struggling to fund the sportfish side of the house. That fund doesn't seem to have seen the same increases as the wildlife restoration side. So that certainly is an issue. The state wildlife grant program, again, that's apportioned annually by Congress, and probably the biggest thing on the horizon with that is whether or not RAWA is going to pass. And if that does, that would replace the state wildlife grant program, and it would essentially double the size of the the funding. So basically the wildlife and sportfish restoration is 1.1 to 1.3 billion annually, and RAWA at its full funding level would be similar. So Recovering Americans Wildlife Act has the potential to be a real game changer if that got passed. And that would be, as it's written now, it's got a 25% match rate. So that would be, I think, a big challenge moving forward. It's how you would match, potentially doubling the funding.
Well, that was going to be my, actually, one of my questions is because we know that states have been challenged even before the concept of RAWA, just with the PR bump that seems to be permanent bump, in meeting and finding the 25% match. Is there any work being done on the national level to look at the CFRs to see if there's a way to modify what would qualify as match, as non-cash match? Is there any talk in doing that, or even? Go ahead.
Yeah, we have definitely been aware that, that it's a challenge for states to come up with a match, and have tried to look at every flexibility we can, and there was some talk with the COVID Relief Act about trying to get some relief to the states for the match on some of these grants, but it didn't get included in the final language. But that is, it's got to be on the forefront of everyone's mind with RAWA. How would the states come up with this money, and is there an opportunity to lower the match rate? going into this. I mean,
well, yeah. Well, I'm just looking at, even if there's, I understand the limitations on the federal side to just write into a bill, how difficult that is, something for wildlife, especially wildlife. But I was hoping that at least a national committee was formed with the states to come up with ideas with the Fish and Wildlife Service, how to maybe amend the rules to allow more flexibility for non-cash match, which would be a start even right now, in preparing for even dealing with making sure you don't get into any issues with even being able to take advantage of that kind of money. So I'm hoping you guys will give some thought. During my tenure all those years ago, I sat on lots of national committees with states and the Wildlife Service, federal aid folks, and I think it was just a healthy way to try to parse out where the real opportunities were and to tighten up the program and make sure it was properly managed and the states were taking advantage in the way they were supposed to. So I just want to express my appreciation for the folks in the federal aid division. They were always good to me. They were good partners, and I think they still continue to be from everything I hear from the director and the employees. So thank you, Cliff.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. Any other commissioners? Vice Chair?
Madam Chair, Mr. Schlichner, thank you. That was really informative, and I just had a question, kind of teeing on the match again. Is there any part of Pittman Robertson or Dingle Johnson that New Mexico is not maxing out right now?
No.
Okay.
You guys apportion all your funds annually.
Terrific. Thanks.
Okay, very good. If we have no other questions or comments from the commissioners, I don't see anyone unmuted. Commissioner Salazar Henry?
Just one last thing. Cliff, can you provide your presentation to Director Sloan so it can be posted on the website? I think that's good information for all our publics to have about how this agency is funded. People talk about federal aid and they really don't know what they're talking about most of the time. It's a little more complicated than just a pot of money, like you said. Thank you.
Absolutely. I sent it to Lance. Lance, can you do that? I emailed it to you this morning.
Yep, it just popped in here.
Okay.
Very good.
We will take care of that.
Awesome.
Okay, let's move into a question from Jesse Dubell. He's online. Mr. Dubell.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask the question. The question I have, Mr. Schlusner, is regarding a series of articles that I've read that has indicated concern that when ammunition is purchased online, in some cases, that ammunition is sent from another country to a buyer in the United States, and that some of those purchases are circumventing the PR excise tax, that they're not subject to the Pittman-Robertson excise tax. And as many ammunition purchases as are now happening online, I think that could be very concerning, and there could be some real lost opportunity there. So I'm not sure if even the information I've read is true or not. So I was hoping you might be able to speak to that for just a second.
Yeah, that certainly would be concerning, because that would be less revenue for you guys to spend on conservation. But I don't have any information on that. I'm sorry. That would be the Department of Treasury who monitors and manages the collection of those taxes. I don't get it until it comes from Washington, D.C. Mike and I get it at the same time.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Schlusner, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask the question.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right. Vice Chair, did you have a comment?
I did not. Thank you again for the presentation.
Okay, well, very good. Excellent presentation. I echo what Commissioner Salazar Henry said. Get those slides, if you could, Lance, post them on the website. Kudos to you, sir, on the service that you and your colleagues are doing at your department. So thank you.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Cliff.
Let's move right into, and guess what? It's 10 o'clock and we're on agenda item number 9. Lord Almighty. Okay, so agenda item number 9 on the posted website is Kurt Patton, the initiation of the Fisheries Rule 19.31.4, Hunting and Fishing Manner and Method of Taking Rule 19.31.10, NMAC and Commercial Use of Fish Rule. The department's going to present an overview of the initial proposed changes to the fisheries manner and method of take and commercial use of fish rules. So thank you. Take it away.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, as you stated, today I'm here to initiate the discussion associated with the new fisheries rule, as well as we are also initiating discussions associated with some fishing related items in the manner and method rule. And finally, there's a little bit of carryover from some proposed language that we are considering for or proposing for your consideration in the commercial use of fish rule. And so that's why we are opening all 3 of these today. Okay, so just as a reminder, the fisheries rule, like other species rules, is on a 4-year cycle. So it was adopted by the previous commission in the fall, I believe, of 2017, went into effect on April 1 of 2018. So it's set to expire this March 31 of 2022. As I already stated, there are a couple of related rules that we are opening up along the way to make sure that the language is consistent among the different rules. So I tried to break this down into, I guess, manageable bites on each of the slides. And this first slide is just a summary of some proposals that didn't necessarily fit into any of the other categories, but certainly are worth mentioning for today. The first of these is we have seen a trend at Abiquiu Reservoir of warming water temperatures. That figure right in front of you, there's a lot going on with it, but I guess the message that comes out of it, if you can see my cursor right over here, is that about 2 to 2.5 months out of the year, the water conditions, the temperature conditions are unsuitable for cold water fisheries now as compared to historically. And so we have ceased stocking kokanee salmon into Abiquiu Reservoir. And so our first proposal is to remove that water from being on the list of a part of the kokanee snagging season, because we don't stock them anymore. We don't really want to create the impression to the public that you can go and fish there and snag for them when they're not there and the water is no longer suitable. Another proposal we're thinking of is to increase the cutthroat trout possession limit from 2 fish to 4 fish. All of the other protected game fish that we manage in New Mexico have a possession limit of twice the daily limit. And so we want to make cutthroat trout consistent with that. There's also an interest in, I guess, managing for cutthroat trout at the Seven Springs Kids Pond, which is adjacent to Seven Springs Hatchery and is a part of our Rio Grande cutthroat trout restoration efforts. And if we were to start stocking Rio Grande cutthroat trout into those waters, and a kid could potentially harvest 3 cutthroat trout and unknowingly violate the rule or the limit on cutthroat trout. So specifically for that water, we'd like to just create a typical bag limit of 5 trout, which can include up to 5 cutthroat trout in that water. There's also a need to add 2 waters, which were recently, I guess, added to an interest in stocking our large catfish during the summer. That would be Trees Lake, which was recently constructed by the city of Deming, and it's a pretty popular area, popular new fishery in that area, as well as Harris Pond, which is in Las Vegas, New Mexico. There are a couple of definition proposals that we'd like you to consider. The first of these is just clarifying what a daily bag limit is. There's been some confusion about whether it's the bag limit based upon a calendar day versus a 24-hour period. We interpret it as the calendar day, but just to put that in rule to make sure that the public is aware of that. We also have a historical reference in the rule to trout waters, and this dates back to when you had to have an actual physical trout stamp on your fishing license to fish within the waters that are outlined in these pink areas. This is an excerpt from our rules information book. And in these areas, you historically had to have a trout stamp when fishing in those areas. Over time, it's become less and less necessary to have that. In fact, there really isn't any reason anymore to have it, and it creates some confusion among ourselves, the public, and law enforcement about questions about what is a trout water. There'll also probably be some changes to a list of winter trout waters in that, and maybe a removal of a reference to warm waters in that same rule section. We have a couple of length limit proposals, changes that we'd like you to consider. The first of these is to remove the statewide walleye length limit. It's currently set at 14 inches. This figure over here on the right is a growth curve from some data we have at Conscious Lake for walleye. And I guess the story there is walleye in New Mexico grow rapidly. And so in their first approximate year of life, they're too small for anglers to catch. Once they hit that next season, which is somewhere in about here, if you can see my cursor, they are already to a size that exceeds the length limit. And so it's one of those length limits that doesn't necessarily make biological sense. And it's creating an opportunity for violations when it really doesn't help protect the population or suit the original purpose of that length limit. The second proposal we have is to remove the length limit for smallmouth bass in the upper Rio Grande. This would be the area somewhere from Velarde on up into the Taos box. This figure is demonstrating that over time we've seen a decrease in the proportion of smallmouth bass that exceed 12 inches. And at the same time, we've seen a trend increasing in the number of smallmouth bass in that reach. And so, I think removing that length limit for smallmouth bass in that reach would open up the opportunity for some harvest and allow people to keep fish that aren't really growing to exceed that size, but also could potentially promote some better growth conditions for smallmouth bass in that reach. So this is I guess a depiction of, on the left side is our current age restrictions and I guess individual with disability restrictions for waters. We currently have a total of 6 different combinations. Some are 11 years and younger, some are 12 years and younger, some are 12 years and younger, and individuals with disabilities. What we are proposing is to combine that into 2 categories, that being the blue and the purple, potentially keeping this third one for specific to Laguna del Campo. We have reached out to the land grant in conjunction with the conversation about the later agenda item with Laguna del Campo. And we've not heard back from them about their I guess, comfort with this change and whether we would potentially merge up to into the purple, where you would allow individuals 11 years and younger and 65 years and older and individuals with disabilities, or we could just open it up to all individuals who want to fish at Laguna del Campo. So we have a handful of access proposals that we'd like to, I guess, propose. So the first of these, and I'm going to stumble through this because I've tried to come up with a good way of describing this, is to try and clarify the opening day of kokanee snagging season at the waters where we conduct annual kokanee spawning operations. That would be Heron Lake, Willow Creek, which is a tributary to Heron Lake, and part of Navajo Lake. For years, we have had this regulation, which attempts to provide, I guess, some flexibility in the opening date associated with when we're done with our operations, and it gives the public some, I guess, a consistent opportunity, a consistent day. And so the regulation currently says something like it is closed from October 1st through I think it's the second Thursday, unless the first Friday is November 1st, and then it's the first Thursday, something like that. And you can see the challenge I go through in trying to explain it to you. And it's a consistent problem for us to try and clarify that in the rules information book, and the public to understand it, and our officers to be able to communicate it. So what we are proposing is to set a date for the opening of kokanee snagging season to November 11th. That is consistently, or it also happens to be Veterans Day. And we think it would help clarify some of the confusion that's been going on for a long time associated with that rule. Another proposal is we have several waters with different hours of fishing that are in rules. So say, for example, it would be fishing at Eagle Nest, it has set hours. Fishing at Santa Cruz Lake has different hours. What we are proposing is to remove the references to those and set up a system where you would either defer to the landowner and what their rules are, or I guess rely upon the signage that we or the landowners would put up. And that would help clarify what sort of rules are in place. There are two waters that are currently closed to fishing that we are proposing to open at this time. The first of these is McKenna Creek in the Gila Wilderness. It was, up until a few years ago, believed to be a Gila trout recovery population, and it was closed as a result of that. After doing some genetic analysis, we learned that the fish barrier had likely failed, or really wasn't a fish barrier, it was a small waterfall. And there's some hybridization in that population, unfortunately. Because of that, we've worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and have determined that it is no longer a Gila trout recovery stream. And so there's really no reason to keep it closed to the public. The second water we are proposing to open is Pine Lodge Creek down in the Capitan Wilderness. Historically, we had attempted to put Rio Grande cutthroat trout in there after a large wildfire. After several sampling events, we've determined that it no longer supports a self-sustaining population of trout. And so we are proposing to open it up, which would give us some flexibility that, depending upon public interest, we could potentially manage it for a rainbow trout seasonal type fishery because it can't sustain a self-sustaining population of trout. And the last one I'm particularly excited about. A couple of years ago, well, not several years ago now, we completed the Pecos Watershed Education Center at Rock Lake Hatchery, as well as some expansions to the warm water side of the hatchery. And there are a couple ponds associated with this that are the outfall ponds, or the settling basins for the ponds. And currently in rule that says that it is unlawful to fish in the hatcheries unless there's an exception to it. And examples of those exceptions would be Glenwood Pond, the Red River Kids Fishing Pond. And so we're interested in exploring the opportunity to open at least one of those ponds to some kids fishing opportunities, where I think we could have kids showing up to visit the Pecos Watershed Education Center, at the same time go over and wet a line. This is an area where we could potentially showcase some of our retired largemouth broodstock and give a kid a chance to catch a 3, 4, 5 pound largemouth bass while visiting that area. So it's something I'm interested in, and we'll see how it goes. There is one concern we have, and that's associated with the hatchery's discharge permit as regulated under the Clean Water Act. We're gathering some more information on that to make sure we wouldn't run afoul of those regulations. So this last slide is just a quick summary of changes that would need to be made, or we feel are necessary to be made, to the manner and method rule, as well as the commercial use of fish rule. The first of these is we've had some confusion with our bait fish rules, where we state it is lawful to use a certain suite of species as bait in a drainage. And it's been interpreted by some that means that if it says the Canadian drainage, it only means the Canadian River itself. And so we're going to add some language to confirm that if you're in the Canadian drainage, the whole watershed, it is lawful to use these species, just to help clarify those things. For some time, we've also, for some reason, have not had shad as listed as a legal bait fish in the Pecos drainage. Shad are native, or gizzard shad are native to that drainage, and we think it's appropriate to make sure that the public can use them in that drainage. We're also proposing to just change the way we communicate what waters are open to the use of trout lines. It wouldn't change substantively any of those waters. It would just list them out in a tabular format. And then finally, we would remove the reference to a trout water in the commercial use of bait fish rule. Again, not changing that rule substantively, just removing that reference that no longer is referred to in our fisheries rule. So, this is I guess the initiation of the discussion. We are early in this process. After today, we will schedule virtual public meetings to be held sometime later in April or May, depending upon the time schedules or the time availability of my staff, with an intent of further developing the language with field ops, and then coming back to you, I believe, at your July meeting with overall expectation of some sort of rulemaking hearing, I believe, in November of this year. Thank you for your time, and I will stand for any questions.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Chief Kirkpatrick. That was very, very good. And the details that you have provided in the explanation, I think, are very good. Commissioners, any questions before we proceed with further discussion and a motion? Vice Chair, I'll let you go first.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just Chief Patton, could you say again what the public input opportunities coming up are for this?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vestbach, yes. So the next opportunity for public input is we will be scheduling public meetings probably later in April or May, depending upon the schedule time, and there will be a virtual format like we've been doing for other rules. I think one thing I've definitely experienced during the pandemic is that the virtual public meetings are a really efficient way of getting a lot of attendance to those meetings. So we'll continue those at least for this process.
Terrific, thanks. And then I guess just a related question. We have the statewide fisheries plan. This is the rulemaking. Do you see revisiting and updating the fisheries plan as well, or on a different timetable? Or how do you see them related?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vestbach, yes, we are in the process of revisiting on a limited basis some of the statewide fisheries management plan. We've previously talked about doing so, and the challenges with plans is they're long. They have a longer term vision for things, and they always get put off by higher priority short term things. The short term I guess fires that come up with trying to build a pond or those sorts of things. So we are in the process of revisiting that, and we hope to get some sort of draft out later this summer.
Okay, well, I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry.
Chief Patton, I have just a couple of questions, and I know you're in the middle of renovating the Glenwood hatchery for Gila trout rearing, and I'm wondering if you're going to be investing in an education center at the Glenwood hatchery in much the same way you did with our first warm water trout hatchery in Rock Lake. So I think that was a great idea when you guys did that. Is that going to be something down the road that you will look at, or is it part of the reconstruction right now?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, that is not part of this phase of the construction. There is currently a birding trail at the facility. I think there's also a semi-self-guided tour to a lesser extent at Glenwood Hatchery, but we do not have sufficient funding to add an education center at Glenwood at this time. So that would be part of the longer term plans.
Are you, going back to the plan, the fisheries plan, are you at all going to even consider, or have you decided not to because we didn't hear it now, but it may be considered down the line, of expanding the catch and release stretches of rivers, or adding tiger muskies in other lakes? Is any of that still up for discussion during this public input process?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry, when the fisheries rule was last adopted, we did a pretty significant overhaul of our special trout waters, and we went from 7 or 8 different combinations with length limits down to, I think, 3 different combinations of special trout water regulations, which includes a catch and release component. Looking at it this time, we did not identify any of those needs right now, though they are certainly up for consideration if the public is interested or if the commissioners are interested in proposing those. Specific to any regulation, but catch and release type regulations. Regarding tiger muskie, when they were originally introduced into the state, it was for a specific purpose of population control of unwanted fish. And we really haven't identified other areas in the state that have that sort of management need, though they have certainly created popular fisheries. And, if someone were interested in those areas, we would be, interested in talking about them. We've been approached about a couple other areas, and when we were approached the local public on those, there was, some pushback on them. So there's definitely been some discussions through the years. We have not identified any, but if someone would identify them or wants to identify them, we'd be interested in talking about them.
I think people just really think it's cool to catch one of those really big fish that you didn't normally see in New Mexico ever until you put them in for population control in those in that lake. So that's all. I'm looking forward to hearing what the public has to say. I appreciate very much that you guys are looking at consolidating all those different age groups that can do this, that, and the other at different places, and opening up more areas for fishing. I think that's great ideas, and I look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kramer and Commissioner Bates, I don't see unmuting buttons, so I'm going to assume that you have no comment. But Mr. Lance Cherry, I do see that we have someone who has a question, and I'd like to take that question, but if we could keep it to less than 3 minutes or about 3 minutes, I'd like to move into a motion after that. So go ahead, please, if we could take that question from the public.
Okay, Madam Chair, Kevin Bixby has his hand up. So Kevin, you've been allowed to talk.
Hi, Kevin. How are you? Kevin. Kevin Bixby. Unmute, please.
Kevin's
Hello?
mic shows he's unmuted, but
We don't hear
really
him.
we can't hear him.
Actually, what I'm going to suggest is, excuse me. I think he had a comment from the previous item, and my apologies. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. No problem. Don't apologize. So at this point, what I'd like to do is move forward and wrap up some of this. I commend Chief Kurt on this. The process that you presented to the commission certainly meets the Conservation Services Program, objective number 4 of the department's strategic plan for fiscal year 2019 to 2023. I think that what you have done is wonderful, and today's discussion will initiate discussions on the proposed amendments to the fisheries rule and associated changes in manner and method, as well as the commercial use of fish rules. And yes, the department will post the proposed changes to the department website and anticipate holding public meetings during spring of 2021. And essentially, my motion that this presentation was for informational purposes, initiating discussions on proposed amendments to the rule. I also heard the department say that they will hold public meetings April and May, coming back to the commission in July, and with the rule hearing in November. So that is my motion, that we proceed accordingly. Is that a sufficient? Well, excuse me, sir. This was just a discussion item on the agenda. It's not an action item. So that's how I wanted to wrap it up. So now let's move into agenda item number 10. And again, thank you, Chief Kirk Patton. You did great. Thank you. So we are moving in with Chief Stuart Lively. This is where we're going to have an initiation of the migratory game rule, bird rule 19.31.6 NMAC. Again, like the last, it is a discussion item where the department will present the initial proposed changes to the migratory game bird rule. So it is always a pleasure to see you. Chief Stuart Lively, are you there?
Yes, Madam Chair. Can you hear me and see the presentation?
I certainly can. Thank you.
Great, Madam Chair and members of the commission. As the chair just stated, this is kind of our annual initiation and annual rulemaking of the migratory game bird rule. Unlike most of our other species rules that are set on a 4-year rule cycle, migratory game bird management is in cooperation with the federal government because they do migrate from Canada down into Mexico, and we coordinate those rulemaking efforts with the federal government as they have part of a role in that interstate movement, and then also coordinate with our other flyaway partners across the states. So some of the general concepts that we're looking at in this rule, similar to the previous years, not a lot of changes, is adjusting the season dates in accordance with the calendar that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service allows us to set. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act sets forth the number of days that we could actually harvest or put birds to harvest, and the service, in cooperation with the flyways, determine what those dates are annually, and then the state is allowed to select dates within that framework to hold our season. So that's kind of the process that we go about. We're working on right now. And adjusting not only the season lengths and dates, but the bag and possession limits according to the U.S. frameworks as well. And then the proposed frameworks were published in the Federal Register in February of this year, with the final frameworks being published sometime late this summer, hopefully July, but definitely before our August commission meeting, where we will approve the final migratory game bird rule for the next season. I think some of the changes that we're looking to propose, again, the dates will be in consultation with kind of our hunters. We're allowed only a specific amount of dates depending. We do have a small sliver of the Pacific Flyway on the western part of the state that's west of the Continental Divide, and the Central Flyway, which is east of the Central Divide. We get a certain number of dates that we can harvest within, and then we work with our public hunters to kind of discuss how we want to set those seasons. I'll show you some proposed dates we have right now at the end of this presentation that we're looking to bring out to public comment for finalizing. One of the species of birds that always kind of adjust a bag limit more frequently than some of the other species is pintail. The pintail bag limit typically fluctuates between 1 on a daily bag limit to 2. This year, given the frameworks and where we're looking at with some of the survey data, and really lack of survey data last year because Fish and Wildlife Service was unable to fly in Canada given COVID restrictions. And so we're really relying upon survey data from 2 years ago to set this year's harvest season, with the hope that we can get into Canada to fly on those breeding and nesting grounds to get a better population count. But because of that, we're using the surrogate data from 2 years ago, and that's why the pintail bag limit is staying at 1. Now, sandhill crane is a little bit different. We do winter surveys on that, not breeding ground surveys, and the winter surveys are typically in or fall migration surveys, either in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, and then the wintering grounds mainly in New Mexico. And we'll adjust the sandhill crane permits on what we saw last year. You'll see here in a second, we're able to actually increase our sandhill crane permits or our allocation significantly, which means that we can increase our public hunting opportunities as well. We'll hold a virtual public meeting mid to late April, so we can gather public input on our season selections that are due on April 30th, so we could get that to the service to be published in the Federal Register, but also allowing the chance for the public to have some input on that prior to us going back to the service for the final frameworks. As I mentioned in the sandhill crane permits, it is based upon those surveys that we were able to conduct during the COVID pandemic last year. So we were lucky to get those surveys in. Our allocation is increasing from last year. We had an allocation of 535 up to 831. 831 is the highest we've received ever on this. It's specific to the Rocky Mountain population or greater sandhill crane. So we have a significant increase in that our harvest availability. And because of that, our proposal is to increase really the Middle Rio Grande hunts, the kind of really probably most applied hunts, and add an additional 75 permits to the draw. We think by adding that 75 permits, that will get us into that still under our allowable allocation of 831, but allow that increased opportunity for additional hunters on sandhill cranes, specifically in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. Real quickly, just on the two different flyways on our initial proposed dates on the duck season and geese season, what we really try to do here, we can split the central flyway into a north zone north of basically I-25, and then south zone is southern in that area. The north zone typically freezes out first, or the ponds freeze over sooner than the south. So that's why you see that earlier opening date in there. The ducks are in there more, but they're typically closes a little bit earlier because we can only have so many days of harvest. But that's to account for freezing conditions where they're typically going down south where we don't have those freeze out conditions. The south zone, we run that to January 31st. That is the latest date allowable that we could have a duck season according to the Migratory Game Bird or Treaty Act, excuse me. And then you'll see goose season, we try to go as late as possible on those. So we just back up the opening date, given the amount of harvest days that we can have for those seasons to go to the latest. Pacific Flyway, similar. We have a north and a south zone, but we try in those north-south zones to get to the latest date possible because we do have some less freeze-out conditions. Scaup is a species that just more intensely managed harvest can't sustain as high as some of the other species, so it just has a less amount of harvest days per year, and that's what you see there. Again, on the goose, we're trying to get as much harvest days as we are allowable, splitting some of that season into account for some resident birds in the north, and then taking into account some of the migratory birds in the south. So again, with that, we'll go out to the public meeting this middle end of this month before we finalize the season dates that we will give to the service in the Federal Register. You all will hear this in May, and then we will finalize in August on the schedule for this rule. And with that, I would take any questions you may all have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chief Stuart Liley. Excellent presentation. Commissioners, do we have any comments or questions?
Madam Chair, just a
Yes, Vice Chair.
question on the Sandhill Crane increased allocation. Can you remind me what the bag limit is in the Middle Rio Grande Valley right now?
That is a 3-bird bag limit right now.
Okay. And you want to keep that the same and increase the allocation?
Madam Chair,
Totally.
Commissioner Vesbach, yeah, this is correct. We would keep the same bag limit, accounting for the increase in allocation. We still believe we'd be under our allocation and keeping the same bag limit. That was one of the discussions we had last year with the public. As we had to reduce that allocation, was one way to do it was reduce the number of hunters or reduce the bag limit. And the public kind of came out in a pretty resounding, don't decrease the bag limit, but decrease the number of hunters. We were actually able to keep the hunter numbers the same, but adjust the seasons. So we ended up adjusting the seasons to account for probably fewer Rocky Mountains in the harvest, which we were under allocation last year. So again, it would just increase hunter numbers with the same bag number.
Okay. And then what about adjusting the season again? Are you looking at that, or just keeping the season to where we moved it to?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, some of those seasons are being moved back to where they were previously, especially some of like the youth ones, to account as we have more available harvest. One of the things that I think is a big thing that we're going to run into, and what we had discussions on, is a hunter density issue. Once you get into that Middle Rio Grande, we just can't, even if we got more allowable allocation, we start running out of places for that many hunters to hunt over those weekends. So we really spaced out the hunts and the number of permits based on when we think the majority of non-graders will occur. We put more hunters in that if that occurs. It's not that it's going to be a less of a quality hunt. It's just that racial composition is lessers than instead of graders, and so just spacing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other commissioners? Questions, comments? Actually, Chief, I do have just a point of clarification. The public involvement. I did hear you say public meetings in April, mid to late, but it's also my understanding that you're going to gather information via mail, email, and quote unquote public meetings in Albuquerque, Farmington, and Las Cruces. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, what we'll do is we'll probably, because of the situation we're in, like last year, we'll hold a virtual meeting instead of meetings across the state. We will hold that one virtual meeting. We'll post this to our website immediately under proposals, under comment, like we do with the rest of our rules. We'll take any written comment we receive, phone calls our biologists receive, into consideration when we adjust those season dates. And then also that the other opportunity for the public to make any comments would be on that virtual public meeting if they choose not to go the route of written comments or emails, etc.
Thank you, sir. So would this schedule be similar like the last one that we just heard, that you would have possible maybe in the July or November timeframe?
Madam Chair, unlike most of our other species rules, we're tied to the federal government, so they can also comment on the federal government Federal Register. So the Federal Register, the proposed rule was published in February. We have until April 30th to determine our season dates that we send to the federal government. Once we kind of send those out, we're locked in on our season dates. There's other issues like the number of permits to draw that we could have different comments on, but the season dates really have to be locked in on April 30th, and that's why we really try to get our public meetings prior to April 30th and don't host them afterwards, because they are locked in kind of after that April 30th date.
Thank you, Chief. I guess what I'm trying to do is get the bottom line. When do you think the rule hearing would be? Would it be in November?
Madam Chair, it would be in August.
In August. Okay, I just needed that clarification. Thank you, sir. So again, this was a discussion item. There's no motion necessary for this. And I think at this point we're ready to proceed. Chief Stewart Lively, you did an awesome job. Thank you again, as always. And I think we are ready to move into agenda item number 11. Colonel Robert Griego. Wow, it is so nice to hear from you. This will be the overview of the department's law enforcement efforts. You all do a phenomenal job, and I am so looking forward to this particular presentation. So thank you, Colonel Griego.
How about now?
Colonel, now we can hear you. Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm here today to discuss our field operations law enforcement program and our law enforcement program overview in general. I will start off with the last year in the March timeframe when the pandemic kind of hit New Mexico or became a pretty significant issue in New Mexico when schools were closed, health orders were brought out, and because of those health orders, we started seeing an influx of people going to the outdoors. By late April, our officers were seeing crowds despite the health orders that rivaled what we typically see on big holiday weekends. Because of the stress level on our citizens, we in field ops, we adapted our law enforcement efforts and tried to focus primarily on public relations and public safety type issues. Did a lot of education to the public that was out there recreating. Many of them were using the outdoors to get out there to reduce the stress level and the uncertainty that was going on at that time. Initially, there was a push by certain citizens that wanting the department to allow subsistence hunting or hunting or fishing without a license, again, because of that uncertainty. So we worked with a lot of the public and gave a lot of verbal warnings, written warnings, and educating people on our basic rules that we had for hunting and fishing. But unfortunately, by late May, we started recognizing that it was kind of a different crowd that was out there, out on the outdoors, on the forest. And we started seeing a significant amount of littering, trash, vandalism, and various game violations. So by late May, early June, we kind of ramped up our law enforcement effort again and started being a little more staunch with enforcing the rules. Despite the pandemic, the wildlife did what wildlife does. And last year we had 539 wildlife complaints, 190 bear complaints, and 28 cougar complaints. Obviously, bear and cougar complaints obviously have a public safety nexus to them. So we have to be very responsive in those types of complaints. Our officers do, and takes a significant amount of time. Despite the drought years we've had, 190 bear complaints was busy, but it was not extreme. We're hoping we'll get some moisture this year because otherwise we're anticipating probably worse than that this year on our bear complaints if we don't get some moisture pretty soon. Also, because of the drought, it does seem to increase when we have wildlife attacks. Unfortunately, last July, we did have a wildlife attack, a bear attack in the Pajarito area, where an individual was attacked pretty severely 3 different times in a span of a few minutes. We have a wildlife attack response team, a group of officers that's highly trained. They're stationed throughout the state that respond to these types of attacks. They're trained in evidence collection and preservation, and also dealing with individuals who have gone through this traumatic event. In this instance, our officers were responded to the scene, and officers were able to locate a bear in the area, and they put that bear down. We had other officers that went to the hospital and interviewed the individual, were able to collect DNA from the clothing and measure bite wounds on the individual. And in turn, the animal that they harvested, the bear that was harvested, they were able to confirm based on bite measurement and DNA that was in fact the bear that initiated that attack. And that's very significant in the fact that it puts the public at ease that we get the right animal that performed an attack like that. Pretty severe attack. And fortunately, the first bear that they came across was in fact the offending bear, and we were able to get it out of the population to keep those people safe. As we moved on to the fall, our officers just worked like any other normal year. This past year, since July or January of 2020, we issued about 3,600 citations. Our officers served about 75 search warrants last year and contacted approximately 50,000 people in the field. Last year, we had 5 felony cases. Those are cases that where individuals kill our big game animals out of season and just take the head and leave the meat to waste. So those are pretty significant crimes that we try and focus on. In fact, 2 cases in the Southeast, 2 of the felony cases resulted in 17 felony charges. They were very good cases. And again, with that 50,000 field contacts, law enforcement is just one of those professions that even though we had a pandemic, our officers were not able to avoid dealing with the public, and pretty significant year in numbers that they had to deal with this last year. On state trust land last year, we had approximately 2,500 contacts in the fall, and we patrolled about 3,500 hours on that state land and detected a little over 100 violations. Also last December, while patrolling waterfowl hunters, our officers discovered about $100,000 worth of marijuana scattered right on the border of the Bernardo Wildlife Area. Kind of out of the ordinary to find that much just scattered out on the landscape. But we never did apprehend, or state police narcotics never did apprehend who had put it out there. But I assume we have a pretty mad drug dealer out there that we kind of tapped into his profit margin that week. Also, unfortunately, about a little over a year and a half ago, we did have 2 officers involved in an officer-involved shooting. That case is still going through the process, but the main thing here is that I firmly believe that because of our training and tactics and the courage that our officers showed, they definitely saved some lives that night. And fortunately, nobody was hurt in that, but that did occur in the last year and a half. Our officers are also utilizing the most advanced technology that's available to law enforcement with our wildlife cases. One example is we had a case in a rural area outside of Corona that elk was harvested out of season. There was no witnesses. We had a rancher find the elk carcass the following morning and notified our officers. The officers took DNA photographs and utilized some technology warrants that are available to us. And it took about 17 months and 6 warrants, but they were able to identify 2 suspects, one out of Albuquerque and one out of Clovis, New Mexico. Once they were able to get in with search warrants, once they identified the suspects, they were able to locate a head and some meat, took some DNA samples off of that, and were able to make the case and get a confession. So it was a pretty significant case, but shows the technology that's out there. We, as a society now, we always carry our phones and we take pride in how fancy our vehicles are. But in law enforcement, we benefit from that. All those fancy vehicles out there, you leave a trail everywhere you are if we can kind of figure it out and utilize it. So that was an instance where our officers were able to work with that technology and make a pretty great case. Our investigative division, or covert division, again, with the pandemic, we saw a significant increase, at least in the advertisement on social media for the sale of big game meat. Our officers did a lot of education in that. There was a significant amount of them that once we contacted them, they had no idea that selling game meat was illegal. So we did do a lot of education, but there were a handful that did know, where we issued citations, and we also sent in our officers undercover to perform by bus, where they went in and met with the individuals and purchased the game meat, and then we had officers go in and cite them. Our investigators also worked with our officers across the state and assisted with 22 different technology type warrants. They worked surveillance on multiple cases across the state. We just recently, on a case that they worked on, where we had some individuals using private land, they were purchasing private land, elk licenses, and then moving into another unit and utilizing those licenses on public land. We just got DNA results back a couple days ago, where an individual involved in one of those cases, not only was he using private land licenses on public land in the wrong unit, he'd actually killed a bull outside of the unit, and then saw a bigger bull a day or 2 later and ended up killing it. And we made that case just 2 days ago based on that DNA evidence. So that was another good case using technology and our investigative unit. This past year also had some pretty significant firsts in that we had a district court judge in Sandoval County and the Court of Appeals awarded the department $74,000 in civil restitution for a large trophy mule deer that was poached a few years ago. This, if you all recall, this mule deer, he scored over 230 inches, was a very significant case that took several months and several officers, even also involved other employees with wildlife management and fisheries. It was a whole department effort on this one. It just little backstory on that if you don't know, this buck was poached in December, I believe, of 2018. Only the head was removed. Our officers found it, started an investigation. We got some information and ended up monitoring this head. The head was moved 4 different times over a span of 6 or 7 months. And the individual that poached this deer was actually one day was going to take it back to North Dakota, got spooked when our officers were following him and ended up throwing it into the river in Bernalillo. Just as luck would have it, that was the water levels in the Rio Grande at that time were higher than normal. So we were unable to locate the head. With help of some of the fisheries management division employees that were pretty good in the water. Once the water subsided, we were able to find this head. Fortunately, the antlers hung up in some debris, and we were able to get the head out of there about 10 days later, and ended up making a fantastic case that the deer itself was $20,000 for our trophy civil. But the courts awarded us $54,000 in reimbursement for the cost of the investigation that the department employees participated in. So that was a pretty significant finding for the department. Obviously, our officers are involved in a lot of public safety. Our officers were involved in 61 search and rescue operations last year. Unfortunately, 3 of those operations resulted in body recoveries. And then obviously we do a ton of motorist assists weekly, where individuals either have flat tires, run out of gas, are stranded because of the weather, whatever the case may be. Our officers deal with them on a weekly, depending on the amount of trauma that some of these individuals that resulted in their death. It's always difficult to carry an individual out for several miles or several hours. Can be pretty tough on our officers. Rita Mountains, and our officers and a couple EMTs had to carry that individual out for several miles in the dark. But they did a fantastic job. The pretty fantastic idea that they came up with in the Southeast is they house on their property. Also with donations, they've gotten their own trap machine and built a trap house out there where they can bring these kids to shoot as much as they want. Again, obviously last year with the pandemic and the health orders, they had to reorganize how they could have their practices, but they got it done, and they are up to 20 youth shooters as of this year. So it's a pretty fantastic organization. And to quote Sergeant Ben Bird, he said that this by far is one of the most rewarding things he's ever done since being a game warden. He's been a game warden for about, probably close to 17 years. And just the fact that giving back to the youth and teaching them this fantastic skill has been highly rewarding for him. Our officers are also involved in a lot of public relation type work. The officers last year, again, with the amount of people that are out in the woods right now, we're seeing an increase in trash, but our officers this last year along the Bosque and other parts of the state worked on some trash cleanup projects, which was pretty rewarding. And obviously the public appreciates seeing officers in uniform out there getting dirty, helping them pick up trash in the forest and along the Bosque where we all like to be, recreate and get rid of that stress level. Don't want to be kicking water bottles. This past January, we also had officers that worked in the Sandias for the first 2 weekends of the archery deer hunt. Our officers, along with some volunteers with backcountry hunters and anglers, worked five primary trailheads. They contacted a little over 1,100 individuals. They checked 29 hunters and discussed with all the individuals that focused primarily on that there was a hunt going on, wildlife management, regulated hunting, a lot of the biology behind population dynamics, buck to doe ratios. And of those little over 1,100 people, they only ran into one individual that was against hunting that was at least vocal about it. They did have a few comments from people, that they hoped the hunters didn't get anything, but it was just very well run, made a pretty good impact on the individuals out there that just really had no idea about hunting or where our funding comes from and what the benefits of conservation that funding provides. So it was pretty fantastic. I guess just a little backstory on this picture. This young lady here that volunteered and helped, I just heard that she also applied for one of our recruit positions. So hopefully we'll get to see her in the next couple months and get her on as a game warden. So it was pretty fantastic all the way around. And with that, I'll wrap it up and take any questions or comments.
Wow, Colonel Griego, I hope you know how awesome you are and your department. Fantastic job that you all are doing. I have a few comments myself, but I'd like to open it up, and I'm going to start with Vice Chair Jeremy, if I could. Again, I had a couple of text messages from you, so if you could, please.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Colonel Griego. I really appreciate that overview, and just really enjoyed seeing the youth mentorship and the public outreach aspects as well. And just thanks to all your field operations for what they do. I also wanted to let everyone know that Commissioner Lopez, he's unable to participate directly today due to work conflicts. However, he is listening online and wanted to pass his kudos along as well.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other commissioners' comments? Commissioner Gail Kramer, yes.
Chairwoman, Colonel Griego, a lot of you know that I get to work alongside a lot of the law enforcement officers in this area, as well as I have in the past in the Northwest area. And it's just such a privilege to work with the professionals that you have and you've trained. And we've done search and rescue, we've done, I won't go into all of it, but it's just been such a privilege, and there's such a great group. And I just admire everything that you've done and that all of the officers have done. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Very good. If no other commissioners have a comment, I do. Just two things, Colonel Griego. You did describe some information regarding citations, the number of search warrants, the field contacts, but also the parental issues that were involved. Then you also described the state land, the state trust land, and the number of violations there. So what perked my ear, my comment is that does the department share some of those numbers or statistics or those cases, collaborate, partner with other state agencies like Children, Youth, and Family, or maybe the state land office, the commissioner? When appropriate, I'm sure you do, but let's just confirm that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, information with the state land office when we meet with them. We have not had a request or shared any of that information with CYFD or any others.
Okay, very good. And then my last comment is actually to you and Director Michael Sloan. In today's meeting and as we move forward this year, I think that the involvement of your department, law enforcement, game warden, it is going to be very important on how we proceed with some of these rules. During the legislative session, it was wonderful to hear the respect of all the parties. For example, just as an example, on the trapping issue, Senate Bill 32, the passion, but the very different perspectives that came out in those discussions in the legislature, those for the bill and those not in favor of the bill. And I think as the commission and the department move forward, I think your department is going to be a very important department, Colonel Griego, on ensuring that we strike the right balance in moving forward on some of these issues. Whether it's trapping or whether it's any other issue in the department, as we just heard with your statistics, you are a very important arm of the department.
Yes, ma'am.
Director?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we certainly always work with our field operations division to coordinate both the enforceability and the appropriateness of any rules that get developed. So I know that Stuart and Kirk are always working with Bobby and his folks to make sure that what we put on paper makes sense on the ground. So certainly that's always happening.
Excellent.
I guess I would also comment on the parental responsibility issue. I think that the number that Bobby had on there, and perhaps I'm wrong, is the revocations related to failure to pay child support. And so that is coordinated between the agencies.
Very good. Okay, nice. Well, I think we can move forward with our next agenda item. And thank you again, Colonel Griego. We are moving into agenda item number 12. It's 11:15, and we are going into general public comments. Depending on the number of persons, Mr. Lance Cherry, do we have persons on standby who would like to speak?
Madam Chair, first up is John Crenshaw.
Ah, very good. Good morning, John Crenshaw.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm John Crenshaw. I'm president of the New Mexico Wildlife Federation. First, on behalf of all of the Federation and all of the sporting and non-hunting and fishing license buyers, we want to express our condolences to the family and friends of David Souls. Their loss is also the state's and the state's wildlife. Commissioner Souls personified the qualities and the character and the expertise that's appropriate to the conservation commissioner position. We'll miss him personally and professionally. Those will be really big shoes to fill. Secondly, excuse me, I believe I heard Cliff Schleusner of the Fish and Wildlife Service mention that the federal state wildlife grants require a 35% state match. If I misheard and it's 25, it's still significant. I mentioned that because the Game and Fish Department has not received any general fund support for more than a decade. So that state support for the species in greatest conservation need comes from hunting and fishing license fees. A couple of bills that died during the past legislative session would have corrected that, but c'est la vie, there we go. We'll be back though, eventually to try again for some general fund support, including for the Recovering America's Wildlife Act if that set legislation passes out of Congress. We had and we'd expect to again have support from a wide range of environmental and wildlife advocacy groups for that. But in the meantime, though, I hope we'll hear some thank yous to the license buyers who support non-game management now. Third and finally, every presentation today once again brings the Game and Fish Department staff's professionalism and dedication to the fore. So our thank yous to them. And thank you, and good. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. That was very kind and that was very good. Lance, do we have someone else?
Madam Chair, that is all we have for this public comment.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you, Lance Cherry. Let's move into agenda item number 13. Kurt Patton, thank you so much, Chief, for the work that you've been doing on this particular item. And also a big shout out to Commissioner Tercio Lopez and Vice Chair Jeremy Vesbach, and of course, as always, Director Mike Sloan. All of you have been working behind the scenes and doing an excellent job. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Chief Kurt, to discuss Laguna del Campo transfer. We would like an overview of this transfer of land by the Commission to the Tierra Amarilla land grant. And I think we also have some persons waiting, hopefully on standby, to also speak. So thank you.
Okay, well, good morning again, Madam Chair and Commissioners. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, this is an update on the process of, I guess, transferring Laguna del Campo to the Tierra Amarilla land grant. There's a long, I guess, it's been a while since we've been together talking about this, so I've included some background information in order to, I guess, bring us all up to speed about what has transpired and how we got to this point. So I guess just a little bit of background information about Laguna del Campo. It is a small man-made impoundment adjacent to Los Ojos Hatchery up near Tierra Amarilla, New Mexico. This map here or aerial is intended to bring you all up to speed on, the parcel in question. And so, this is right here, if you can see my cursor, this is the Park View / La Puente ditch that is delivering water to the lake as well as to downstream land areas. This is the dam here. This is a small tract of land that the commission would retain that includes one of our houses that houses a hatchery employee. And from this point down there, this trash trap, the ditch is actually in a pipeline. So Laguna del Campo was originally constructed back in the 1930s. It was a part of the original hatchery construction and operated as a broodfish pond where they would do spawning operations for the rainbow trout that were reared at that facility at that time. In the 1970s, Laguna del Campo was, I guess, changed a management perspective, and it was actually open to the public for a put and take rainbow trout fishery. And we've managed it that way since that time. It generates about 2,500 angler days per year, which is on the lower end of angler days produced by commission-owned dam properties or commission-owned lakes. I mentioned that just for, it's again part of the historical perspective associated with the lake. The commission also owns water rights to, I guess, permit the diversion of water from La Puente ditch into the lake. There's the most appropriate or most pertinent water right associated with this property is the right to divert 10 cubic feet per second from La Puente ditch, or excuse me, Parkview ditch, which is then stored up to 97 acre feet. The water right includes a 97 acre foot, I guess, storage right. And then that water is intended to be under the permit returned to La Puente ditch undiminished in quantity. So another part of what got us to this point is Laguna del Campo is part of, or at the lower end of this larger watershed here. So here's Laguna del Campo here. All of this is part of the upper watershed and where it is situated. And the reason I mention that is back in 2009, the Office of State Engineer updated their dam safety rules. And there were several deficiencies identified with the dam. The most notable one was the capacity of the spillway to transfer or pass water through it to avoid, under certain precipitation conditions or flooding conditions, to avoid overtopping of the dam. And so this is a picture of the dam here and the spillway, and it currently passes about 1,100 to 1,200 cubic feet per second. Once we learned about the deficiencies, we hired an engineering firm to do basically a flooding analysis and a potential breach analysis and what would happen if the dam were breached. And based upon some engineering analyses and some of the statistics are included on my slide there, is that under a situation where the dam were just a breach on a sunny day, you would experience some amount of flooding, about 8,000 cubic feet per second as it passed through the dam. Based upon that analysis, there would be a significant amount of water flowing down towards the Chama River. But if you had a significant precipitation event, and this is an engineering term of art, for example, a 50% 6-hour local storm with a probability of maximum precipitation, and then a breach. So that would be the floodwater coming down, overtopping the dam, and then the dam breaches. You would have a flooding event of about 24,000 cubic feet per second. For a 100% 6-hour local storm with a probability of maximum precipitation breach, you're looking at a flow event of about 27,000 cubic feet per second. Under the 100% scenario, you would have some inundation or flooding of potentially occupied structures downstream of the dam. And so again, that was part of the decision-making alternative process that the department and the previous commission underwent in defining, what we would do to address these deficiencies in the dam. So the next step was to work with an engineering firm to identify alternatives for renovating the dam to bring it up to compliance with the Office of State Engineer rules. And that firm came up with 3 different options. The first of these was to somehow reinforce the dam with rolled concrete, so if there was an overtopping event, the earthen dam wouldn't get washed away. That was estimated at about $7.2 million to implement. This was done several years ago. Based upon recent experience with bids, this number is probably low given today's situation, but nonetheless, that was the estimate at that time. Another option was to reduce the size of the dam, basically the height of the dam and the amount of water that would be impounded would be reduced. It was somewhere between 11 acres down to 1 surface acre at a cost of $2.5 million. I believe one of the issues with this option is that 1 surface acre, this would drastically reduce our ability to manage for a put and take fishery at that location. And then the final alternative developed was to breach the dam, return the area to its probably native wetland state, and no longer have a fishery at that location. That was estimated about $1.8 million. So in I guess, conference with the previous commission, the department developed and pursued the last alternative of breaching the dam. We held a public meeting back in 2017 in the area to present these alternatives and the preferred alternative, and it was not popular with the public at that time. And at that time as well, the Tierra Amarilla land grant representative stepped in and said that they were interested in assuming responsibility or assuming ownership of the property in order to maintain it as a fishery if the commission and the department no longer wanted to do so. So in 2017, again, the previous commission directed the department to enter into negotiations for the transfer of Laguna del Campo to the land grant. I believe it was the legislature in 2019 passed Senate Joint Resolution 2, which authorized the commission to transfer 22.4 acres of land associated with Laguna del Campo to Tierra Amarilla land grant. I believe it was the first commission meeting with this current commission in June of 2019 authorized conditional approval of the property subject to addressing some concerns which had been expressed by representatives of the La Puente Ditch Association. Their concerns were focused on water operations and how they would change, what water rights would be transferred, who would be responsible for maintenance of the dam, who would be responsible for maintenance of the trash trap, those sorts of items. Since that time, we have met with representatives of the Tierra Amarilla Land Grant as well as La Puente Ditch Association to address some of those concerns. I think many of those concerns have been addressed. The one lingering question or concern, I think, is the whether or not to transfer water rights associated with the lake. Based upon previous conversations with this commission, I think that, the department's perspective is that in the best path forward for proceeding with the transfer and addressing the concerns of all parties is to do the following. The first step would be to transfer the property outlined in green on that aerial photo to Tierra Amarilla Land Grant. The next step would be to take the water right associated with the lake and transfer the storage right to the Tierra Amarilla Land Grant, and the commission retain the diversion right of 10 CFS and enter into a long-term lease, say a 99-year lease with Tierra Amarilla Land Grant for a portion of that diversion right to account for the evaporative loss that the Office of State Engineers has calculated for us on an annual basis. And so that way there would be sufficient water to divert into the lake to account for evaporative loss, and also for the department and the commission to retain the water rights or the diversion right. So I think, so that is all I had. I'm going to bring that last slide up again because it's useful to have this map to refer to. And so thank you for your time, and I will take any questions you may have.
Wow, 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 wow. Chief Kurt, you did an excellent job. Pat on the back. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, Director Sloan, I think this would be very good where we might open things up for discussion and the general public. Before we do that, Director Mike Sloan, do you want to add anything to what the chief just said?
Madam Chair, I think Kirk covered it very well. You know, we have been actively engaged in conversations with everybody involved over the time that this has spanned, and you know, I think we now all have a full understanding of kind of what the options are, and just need to figure out how we'd like to proceed.
Amen. And commissioners, if you don't mind, rather than open it up for questions from you now for Chief Kurt, I thought it might be better where we just dive right in with persons that would like to speak. Lance, Cherry, do we have anybody prepared and ready?
Madam Chair, we have David Benavides first.
Wonderful. David Benavides, thank you so much for all persons coming forward to speak. I would love for you to state your name, your position, and the role that you have in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is David Benavides. I'm an attorney with New Mexico Legal Aid, and for 30 years I've worked with New Mexico Legal Aid assisting acequias and land grants on various water rights and land and property matters. And I'm assisting the Tierra Amarilla Land Grant. They asked me to assist them in this matter, and but there's two other folks, at least two others that I know of that are going to speak as well. So I'll confine my comments to legal matters. I appreciate the recap of the events leading up to where we are now. I think one thing that's important to note is that in Senate Joint Resolution 2, the only condition that was placed by the legislature for the transfer of the property was that the land remained the common lands of the Tierra Amarilla Land Grant. And that, of course, from the land grant's perspective, is not a controversial or problematic requirement at all. But since then, since 2019, when there seemed to be a lot of momentum, things have kind of moved slowly. And one reason has been that there's been some new ideas for the transaction that have been raised, not by the land grant, and that has kind of slowed things down. You all know the saying that the devil's in the details, and the land grant has concerns regarding some of these new issues that have been raised and whether they distract from the original intent. I think the land grant believes that the legislature was well aware that the land grant intended to use to operate the lake for fishing. And so the land grant that the legislature, pardon me, intended that the water rights transfer with the land into the ownership of the land grant, because that would be something that would obviously be needed in order for the land grant to perform that operation. So that the idea of a lease is problematic. I think you'll hear from some of the other folks about that. But other issues have to do with the idea that there might be other conditions in the deed or in the legal documents on the transfer other than remaining as common lands. For example, one condition that's been floated is for the continuous operation by the land grant as a fishing facility. And of course, as I just said, that's the intent. The intent is to do that, but under conditions of drought or under conditions of dam work on the dam infrastructure or that type of thing, there may be periods of time. So it would have to be drafted very carefully. We wouldn't want the property to revert to the state because of a drought or because of work on the dam causes there to be temporary suspension of the fishing activities. So we'll be looking at that very carefully. In addition, there's a question of fees. And of course, the land grant does want the fishing to be affordable and free if possible. The land grant does would have to maintain the premises and doesn't have a revenue stream. And so again, we would look very closely at if someone were to propose something that the legislature didn't require, which is to impose some kind of strict requirement having to do with fees or funding that might be provided, for the maintenance of the property. The land grant is well aware that the water rights associated with this property are junior water rights, junior to both of the ditches involved, the Parkview ditch and the La Puente ditch. And I think that's been established to everyone's satisfaction. I don't think the land grant and the two ditches are not at odds over the fact that that the water rights are junior to them. Finally, I would just offer that I'm available. This is my area of expertise is water rights and land grant law, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions that the commission may have or to discuss with any of you any questions that you may have. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benavides. Do we have others? Lance, Cherry?
Madam Chair, I believe also Antonio Manzanares is going to also speak.
Excellent. Welcome, Mr. Manzanares. It's nice to hear from you. Good morning. We do not hear you. Can you unmute your button?
Madam Chair, hold on one moment, please.
Okay.
Antonio, I think you should be able to connect now and be able to speak.
Mr. Manzanares? Antonio Manzanares. Hello? If he's having trouble, Lance, connecting, is there another person we can hear from before, so that we get everything covered in this agenda item? I don't want to lose anyone.
Madam Chair, Antonio's what I'm getting is that he's using an older version of Zoom, and
Ah.
so he has not been able to connect. As for any others, I don't have anybody with hands raised, and I don't have a list of any others unless they put them up. So, okay, I got a couple popping in now. So,
Okay, very good.
Arturo Archuleta, we will connect you now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Mr. Archuleta.
Hello. So for the record, my name is Arturo Archuleta. I am with the New Mexico Land Grant Council, and we are a state agency. It's a 5-member council. It's appointed by the governor, similar to the Game Commission. I'm staff to the council, and we provide support to land grant communities throughout the state. We've been assisting the Tierra Maria Land Grant with this Laguna del Campo transfer process. And I want to, commend everyone for sort of the continued work on this. It's sort of been a long journey. It did start back in 2017. And although there's been some bumps in the road, I'm hopeful that we can kind of get these worked out so that we can get the transfer to move forward. One of the concerns, and Mr. Benavides may be able to address this and explain a little bit better because he is an expert in water law, that I think was raised from the land grant with relation to the notion of the water rights and how it would be either transferred or leased, relates to the withholding of the diversion and sort of the splitting of that right. And I just want to be clear that I know the community's concern with that happening is that there's the potential at some point in the future that a future commission could opt or decide to do something else with that diversion, and then the land grant would be stuck with a storage right without the ability to actually put water into the lake. I'm also, it's unclear to me how that separation of diversion would work because as I understand it in the permit, and again, I'm not a water rights attorney, but in the permit, the diversion is specifically for storage, to put water storage into the lake, as well as I believe it was around 22 acre feet of water in consumptive use that would allow for recharge through evaporation. And I know that it was mentioned by Game and Fish staff that there was a requirement to put all the water back into the La Puente ditch undiminished. And as I understand it, and I may be wrong, that the 96 acre feet and the 22 acre feet of consumptive right, because it's a right and it's junior, that water doesn't technically have to be put back into the La Puente ditch. It's just anything in excess of that. And so that may be an area that Mr. Benavides can clarify about sort of how water rights work and how the permit works, that I think would be important for the commission to sort of understand in making the decision. The other thing is that I know there was mention about a 99-year lease, but I believe there are some rules against long-term leases, and I don't remember what the cap is. It may be a shorter period. I think it's something like 10 years under the state engineer's office rules about leasing of water rights. But again, I think Mr. Benavides might be able to answer that better than I. And so, I think those factors in terms of what could happen into the future is one of the considerations why the land grant would really like to just sort of have the ability to have the water rights transferred with the lake. I think that was kind of an assumed, and unfortunately it was missed as part of the early discussions, in 2017, when this was mentioned before the Game Commission. The discussion there was just to transfer the property whole as it existed. And that's kind of what was reported to the interim land grant interim committee, and they're the ones sort of took the lead on the development of Senate Joint Resolution 2. I think had they realized that there was going to be a potential separation of the water right from the property, they would have likely included that in the legislation. But unfortunately, they kind of just stuck to the property as it was described, and the water rights question never really came up until after the passage of Senate Joint Resolution 2 and the discussions that we entered into with the Department of Game and Fish. And with that, Madam Chair, I can stand for questions, and if you like to get any of those questions that I had answered by Mr. Benavides, I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Archuleta. That was very good. Mr. Lance Cherry, do we now have Antonio Manzanares? I mean,
Madam Chair, I think we do.
okay, very good.
Am I on?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead. Good morning. Go ahead. While we wait for Mr. Manzanares to get a connection again, and I'm hoping that there are others present who would like to speak, possibly La Puente. But Lance, I think I could maybe, so as not to waste time or lose time, very valuable time.
Madam Chair, it looks like he's connected now.
Okay, go ahead, because I'm going to have to proceed. We don't have a lot of time.
Okay, am I back on?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll start again. Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you for the invitation. This is basically the first invitation we've ever had. I've spoken to the mayordomo and the other commissioners about my representing the La Puente ditch in this setting, and also representing myself and my wife, of course, as the adjoining landowners there to the commission. I am probably the person who has the most knowledge and has the most experience with this issue with a lake in the La Puente ditch, because I've been a mayordomo. I was a mayordomo for 25 years, or over 25 years, a commissioner for over 15 years, and a downstream neighbor, of course, all my life. So to just give you a quick rundown, because I could speak about this issue the whole morning, basically, or the whole afternoon. But just to give you, as to not bore everybody with all the details, a short synopsis of the history, because we are the people that are impacted the most, we feel, by any transfer, anything that happens on this lake, transfers or anything else, as Mr. Sloan can attest to. We've gone at it before. When the La Puente ditch filed the Declaration of Water Rights in 1924, it explicitly explains that the springs are part of this water right. So that's almost 100 years. It will soon be 100 years of history with this, which is, I will not try to tell you about, because that would be a fool's errand. But the state engineer, when the hatchery, I'll jump to the point to when they constructed the hatchery, when the state engineer allowed the New Mexico Game and Fish Department to create the fish hatchery and later the lake, they recognized the rights that we had on that 1924 declaration. Well, when I became the mayordomo, and that, I guess it went along for many years, was when my grandfather owned the property. My wife and I currently own it now. But then I became the mayordomo after I came home from college, and I recognized that there was a problem with the lake issue and bringing the water back into the ditch. And so we proceeded to work with the Game and Fish Department, and the details I won't tell you much about. We raised the level of the lake to try to give it more head coming down, because basically what Kirk didn't probably explain, if you're still looking at his screen, there is another ditch that goes underground there that goes into our property and meets somewhere down below. Well, we've changed that since. I mean, it's still underground, but one of them was we did when the game department decided to drain the lake. I don't know when it was. Mr. Sloan can tell you when. They had to negotiate with us. They recognized our right. So they negotiated with us. We ended up constructing a pipe, which is another issue that I will not address today, basically, except that there is an issue with that, with the way the pipe was put in. So, but to jump even further, when the Game Commission, well, actually, let me go back just a little bit. They actually operated an illegal fishing lake for quite a few years there. And I pointed out to Mr. Sloan that that was illegal. What they were doing is that they had changed the use of the water from one right to another, and without applying for it. So I don't know if because of that or because they felt like they needed to do it, they applied to the state engineer to change the use of the lake. I actually protested the change in use in 2002, but of course the state engineer ignored my letter, or our letter, I guess you could say. So we jumped further forward then. So it became a fishing lake, and it's fine. Then when the commission decided to change to give it away, I guess you could say, or to divest themselves of this property, and we found out about it, we wrote a letter, which I sent to you, Madam Chair, and I'm assuming you have shared it with the other commissioners. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Have you shared that letter with the other commissioners?
They have the letter.
Okay. So, and of course, we're ignored. Didn't even get a response from them, period. So when the new commission came in, which is you folks, I don't think you were on there yet, Madam Chair. Maybe you were, I'm not sure. To the commission, we resent the letter to you folks, and we received a couple of replies from individual commissioners, but no action was taken to our knowledge, and nobody ever came to see us. And so that sort of added insult to injury as far as we were concerned. So, and in some of these, and when, in the public meeting, we were actually, that was held up here in Tierra Maria, we were actually made out to be the bad guys because we wanted to stop people from fishing. Well, that was not our intent. When the game department decided, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. We did find out about that that the Game Commission had decided to get rid of the lake and turn it into a wetland. We were elated. We thought, wow, after 90 years or so, we're finally going to get the water back in the ditch where it belongs and be made whole. So then there was a public outcry, and all this happened, of course. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here because I wrote some notes down, and
Mr. Manzanares, I'm going to ask you to wrap up in 1 minute because typically we only give 3 minutes per speaker, and I'm giving you way more than 3 minutes, sir. And I really respect you and everybody that's speaking here today. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to wrap up, and then I'm going to ask Lance Cherry to help me with the management of my time. 1 minute, sir.
All right. Okay. We have in many instances been made out to be the bad guys on this issue. And all we're trying to do is protect our rights and livelihoods. So I hope this gives you an indication of why we feel we have been the aggrieved party in this situation and have not really been taken care of. I mean, the dam safety issue was the initial thing that came up, and I don't think that's really been addressed completely. It seems like the commission decided to divest themselves of this lake and give the problem to somebody else. Thank you very much. And now I'll take questions. I had more to say, but that's fine.
Actually, Mr. Manzanares, I'm not going to have the commissioners ask you questions, but thank you, sir. Lance Cherry, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? We cannot hear you, Lance.
Madam Chair, we have Steve Polacco next.
Excellent. Thank you. Steve Polacco, good morning. And it's approaching 12 o'clock, and we still have some other items on our agenda. So Steve
Hello?
Polacco, go ahead.
Yes, do you
Good
hear me?
morning. Yes, and I
Good
think I'm
morning,
going to
Madam
give you 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm Steve Polacco, and I'm the president of the Merced de los Pueblos de Tierra Maria. And we have been in this discussion since 2017. And at that time, everything seemed to have gone well. And we have always said that we respected all the rights of all downstream users of the acequia or in all the waters that are contained within those acequias. And we also respect the rules and regulations set forth by the state engineers in the adjudication under the consent order to respect all the permits, licenses, etc., to make sure that downstream users or any users of the acequia waters as irrigators or parciantes of those acequias are respected and held to the utmost respect. We will also follow our mission to protect and educate the public on how to maintain and manage all of our common lands and waters to the best of our ability. We respect that you are listening to us and hope that you understand that one big issue that came up to me as advocate for the Asociación de Acequias Norteñas is that, which is part of the water rights adjudication, is that any kind of leasing or transfers of waters off of the acequias is not acceptable. If we agree to a lease from the Game and Fish, the waters, it would be a first time, and it would set a precedence that would be damaging to the acequias in all, not only in our communities, but throughout the whole state as a spillway or an open door for others within the community of the ditches to follow the same suit. And before you know it, everybody is going to want to lease out their water and for a high price, and we will have the diminishing of the acequia system or community. So we're against any kind of water transfer or leasing or what have you. What we do want, giving you the information that we respect all the permits and all the agreements that were set forth, and also what was said in the 2017 meeting, what Kenzel had said that he wanted to transfer, there was questions about transferring the water and the lake and everything, and his response was to transfer the whole shooting match.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much. I hope.
Thank you, sir. I do
Thank
appreciate
you, Madam
that.
Chair.
Okay, very good. Lance, do we have any other persons wanting to speak from the public?
Madam Chair, Travis Regensburg.
Travis Regensburg? Good
Yes.
morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. 3
Yes.
minutes. 3 minutes.
All right. Recently, in 2018, I brought this attention to Captain Grego in reference to one of your officers. Which, there was some misconduct, and I have yet to get any response from the department or anyone else in reference to this officer, Sean Carroll. And I had brought it to the attention of Teresa Lopez. I believe he's not with you all no more. At least I don't see him on the panel here, which he was told me he was going to address the issue. And I would like some resolution on that issue. I think he can visit with Captain Griego in reference to it. You know, I listened to him talk about all the good things his officers do, but you know, your officer's not exempt to the laws or abuse of power or anything of that nature. I'm not going to get into the details because this is a sensitive matter, but this is, you know, I need some answers, and I need this issue resolved. And it's became an issue that violated several laws of the state of New Mexico.
Excuse me,
in reference to
Travis Regensburg, the agenda item that we were focused on was on Laguna del Campo. And I totally respect what you're trying to say here. Personnel matters. I would love for you to address those directly with the Director of Game and Fish. And
I have, and all it does is get covered up.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, I appreciate your bringing it up here, but right now on this agenda item, we are discussing Laguna del Campo. So thank you. Anybody else, Lance, Jerry?
You're very quiet, Lance. Trying to be a ventriloquist. Can't hear
Lance,
you.
you're still on mute. Okay, he's not going. Okay, so at this point, I'm not sure if we have other members of the public present, but while Lance addresses that, Director Mike Sloan, Chief Kirk Patton, we had some very important points presented by the members of the public. I'm not going to go through all their names. I'd like to hear a response from the two of you and then open this up to commissioner discussion.
Okay, Madam Chair, I wrote down, I think, three questions that I think would be worthwhile to discuss if you're okay with that.
And who are the questions for?
I think it was my attempt to answer them.
Oh, very good. Okay, please.
Okay.
What are the three questions and your answers to them?
I don't remember who it was, but I think there was a question about the ability to split the water right, the diversion versus the storage right. And during this whole process, we've been coordinating with the Office of the State Engineer, and that was one of the potential solutions that they identified for us that would be a workable solution. So I think being able to split the right between the storage and the diversion right, at least in their mind, is lawful. I think there was another question about the duration of a lease, if that were the path that were taken. The Water Leasing Act, I believe, limits leases to a maximum of 10 years, but and I believe it was Mr. Benavides who proposed this to us. Because there's no change in the point of diversion or the type of use, that the lease could be for a longer period than the 10-year limit in the Water Leasing Use Act. And we confirmed that with the Office of State Engineers that they believed that was appropriate as well. So looking at my list, there's one other I think that's worth noting. Again, I don't remember who mentioned it, but it's all related to the lease. And I do, again, Office of State Engineers indicated to us that a lease would be a viable alternative. So.
Okay, very good. So commissioners, I'd like to make this a very productive discussion, and particularly now that we have everybody present that might be able to answer some questions. So I'm going to open it up to Vice Chair Jeremy and then Commissioner Roberta. And then, of course, any of the other commissioners, Kramer, Bates. Let's focus on facts. I think the discussion of history is important, but we've already heard history. So moving forward, we need to focus on today and going forward. We don't need to get clarification of what happened in the past. I'm very interested in how do we get today and move forward. So Vice Chair and then Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First, I just wanted to again thank the Chair Almaria Land-Grant for stepping up to keep this open to the public. There's 2,500 angler days a year, people visiting and using Laguna del Campo. Really appreciate stepping in like that, and do apologize that this has taken taken a long time. I think none of us in June of 2019, when we gave conditional approval, thought it would get this long, but it's gotten complicated with the water rights. And Chief Patton, I guess following up on that, I am anxious to get this completed and in a way that meets everyone's needs. And could you explain the difference between, go into a little more, so that on paper there's the 10 CFS diversion right. Does the way the department operates Laguna del Campo now, do we divert 10 CFS and return it through that piping system? Or is it operated differently than the way it is on paper?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, the short answer is no, we do not divert 10 cubic feet per second for the vast majority of the time associated with it. The way the current operations are, and Mike certainly has a longer history with this, so if I get something wrong, we work with La Puente Ditch Association on periods, when the lake is getting low, we will divert some water into it. There are periods where they may be in a hay cutting season where they don't need the water downstream, and so they'll send the water into the lake, and that's how we execute that diversion right. But we do not send 10 cubic feet per second through the lake, at least in my tenure as chief.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We tend to divert only on an as-needed basis and in coordination with La Puente.
Okay, and talk to me about the return flow system, because on paper there's a 10 CFS diversion right that's supposed to return to the ditch through this piping system that was built. It's my understanding that does not work well. And do we use that system?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vesbach, there is a point, and it's right associated with the spillway. There is a point there that water can be sent down an additional pipeline that Mr. Manzanares referred to, and the head pressure on it is quite low, and so it will take some water and send it down to a downstream, ultimately hooking up with the La Puente ditch. But it's our understanding that because of the head pressure, it does not efficiently deliver water to the fields that they are irrigating. And so it is not a desired means of sending water back to that ditch.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Buck, it also has the potential and does, when you block the water to push it out the irrigation gate, it can push water back into the lake rather than out the irrigation gate because of the flattening of that lower ditch, which further slows the ability to irrigate those pastures.
Okay. So, just to kind of summarize, it seems like the issue that we've gotten hung up on here is that this 10 CFS right with this return flow system is not the way the lake has been operated. And so there's some concern about transferring a water right that would then doesn't really operate that way, because the game department has operated kind of on a handshake agreement with Mr. Munson with the La Puente Ditch Association. And so this lease proposal, is it accurate to say that was an effort to get at how the how the lake has actually been operated, where it's, water is replenished. Is that accurate or inaccurate to say that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Vestbach, yes, I think that would be an accurate way of describing it.
Okay. Well, I'm hopeful we can. I mean, I'm not saying this is the exact thing that needs to happen, but the leasing, I think, land grant brought up some good points, but I think, this is what we just need to get worked out. It seems to get this completed, and I'm anxious to get this completed. I know the land grant has wanted to do work on the lake and see capital outlay and do improvements, and and I'd like to see if we can get to an agreement that keeps all parties whole and doesn't put a future commission in a bad place, but also honors the land grant's desire to make sure they get a lake, not a not a hole in the ground. And I'm really appreciate you bringing this up today. Appreciate everyone talking, and I hope we can find an agreement here relatively quickly and move forward.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Those were very helpful questions and very good answers. And before I jump to Commissioner Roberta Salazar Henry, I want to make it very clear that in moving forward, we're looking for facts. What we heard from Chief Kurt and all of the other members of the public, the history, the background, very important, and I thank each of you for doing that. But for today now discussion, we need the facts and how we can get to yes. Okay, so Roberta, Commissioner Salazar Henry, do you have some comments?
I do. I want to thank both parties for, just as Vice Chair Vestbach mentioned, for all the time that they've spent trying to come to an agreement. I'm concerned that, just as Vice Chair Vestbach is, that we still are in the middle of this. And I believe it's because the transfer of any water was left out of the SJR2. I went through and have read that, and I've read the analysis for that, and nowhere was water mentioned. It was transferring the land to be administrated back of the administration of the land grant. And I think that was a big snafu. And that is why all of this is so complicated, because I also believe that the appraisal that is mentioned in the FIR was done without any water rights considered in the value of the property as well. I think that's significant. What I do want to do is find a way, because the previous commission was, in my opinion, flippant and hasty in their desire to get rid of this property. There was not a lot of forethought placed into what that would mean. And so I'm going to say that I'm laying some culpability on them. And now we're trying to get everybody together to come to something that respects both Mr. Manzanares and the 1939 agreement. And so I would very much like to find a way to meet both those needs. I don't know what it is, but I am also more comfortable with the aspect of leasing and the timeframes now that that's been clear. So, Madam Chair, I am just hoping that what we can maybe do at this point with this issue is establish a small group like we did with the state trust lease when we got bogged down into negotiations, and have a couple of 3 commissioners work with the 2 groups and the director and Kirk to come to an agreement, and then present that to us so that we can move forward. My goal is to get to meet everybody's expectations, but the problem is the expectations were different back in 2017 when the property was given away in the meeting or up for sale, however you want to place it. And then when the legislation was written and the interim committees met and the appraisal was done, And now we're trying to figure out what to do, because this joint resolution only states that it can go to the land grant, the land, and if they ever try to get rid of it out of the land grants jurisdiction, it comes back to the Game Commission. That's the only two criteria in there. So how we move forward is going to mean that I would ask that both those groups please sit down and work at trying to get this resolved, and come to the middle. And so right now the leasing option is something I'm really interested in, but I would like to suggest a small group to work this out, and that hopefully warranty deed or whatever it is.
Thank you,
Those are my
Commissioner.
comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will remind all of the commissioners and the members of the public that on our agenda, we have an executive session where we can flush out some of this stuff in a bit more detail rather than in this public setting. That's very important that we do that through the executive session. Commissioner Gail Kramer and Commissioner Jimmy Bates, any comments? Commissioner Kramer?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think what Chief Patton not proposed but suggested is it's strong. We've been through this. We've been through so many negotiations already. But I think transferring the land and the storage right to the land grant, and the commission retained the diversion right and lease for 99 years is a good compromise. And knowing water rights like we do, it's always going to be very contentious, and I think it's a good compromise.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Bates?
No, Madam Chair, no comments.
Okay, very good. Well, I wanted, and before I wrap up, Director Mike Sloan or Chief Kirk Patton, do you want to add anything?
I don't have anything, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Me either, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and I do see some comments here, Lance Cherry. Should I read the comments as I've done in the past, or is this person ready to speak?
No, Madam Chair, that is completely at your call. You provided a public comment period. It's up to you if you want to read those comments, if you want to take any additional, or if you want to move on.
I will, as I have in the past, I typically read what is in the comment box, so I think I will be consistent with my past practices. When the lake was built, was there a change of use decree approved by a court? If not, has there been injury to any of the original water right owners? So I think that's a very good question. And I want to thank the person who did pose that question. Chief Kirk Patton and Director Mike Sloan, if you could just please, maybe offline, we could go ahead and consider that question during our executive session, and then how are we going to move forward? Is that okay?
Certainly.
Or did you want to address that right now, Chief?
Madam Chair, if you would like, I can answer it now.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the department changed the water use permit from aquaculture to, I think it was a recreational lake. I'd have to look at the actual language in the permit. I believe that was done back in 2002 or so. And this water right has been approved by a federal court associated with water adjudication in the Brazos River Basin. That was approved in 2010 by that judge. So the water right includes let's see, just for your information, it includes a purpose of use for fish hatchery, domestic and recreational fishing. So.
Perfect. Very good. Well, thank you for bringing that fact forward. Okay, I think we are now ready to move into our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 14, where we move right into the executive session. This is close to the public. We have a number of important matters here, and I'm going to ask the commissioners if I will go ahead and make the motion. I hereby move to adjourn into executive session close to the public pursuant to section 10-15-1H2 of the New Mexico statutes in 1978 to discuss limited personal matters, section 10-15-1H8 of the New Mexico statutes to discuss property acquisition, and pursuant to section 10-15-1H7 of the New Mexico statutes to discuss matters subject to attorney-client privilege relating to threatened or pending litigation in which the commission and or the department is or may become a participant. And all of this is listed in the agenda item number 14 subsections A, B, and C of our agenda. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Bates. Director Mike Sloan, could you please take a vote, a roll call vote?
Commissioner Salazar Henry. I'll come back to her. Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Yes.
Commissioner Salazar Henry. Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
4 yeses and 1 pass, excused or unable to connect. I don't know what to call that.
We love these virtual meetings, but Lance, you're doing a great job. It's not you. Yeah. Okay.
Chairwoman?
Yes, Commissioner. Salazar Henry.
My internet's going in and out, so I didn't know if there was a vote. I didn't know if there was a vote I missed. My internet's going in and out.
Are you okay with going into executive session is in essence the vote?
Yes. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, members of the public. We will be going into a very, hopefully, brief executive session. Okay, well, welcome back. It is now 2 o'clock, 2:11 p.m. on April 7th, to be exact. I'd like it presented for the record. The commission had adjourned into executive session. We were closed to the public. During the executive session, the commission discussed only matters specified in its motion to adjourn, and it took no action as to any particular matter except for the following. And I believe Vice Chair Jeremy Vespach, would you like to go first?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the department to engage in discussions on acquisition of property in McKinley and Sandoval counties.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Henry. Director, can we please go to a roll call vote?
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vespach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you,
And
Commissioner.
And Chair, may I just state that at 12:30 p.m., Commissioner Tircio Lopez did join the executive closed session, and then he did depart at 1:49 p.m. Thank you.
And also for the record, let it be known that he was only via phone. He was not on the video for discussion. Okay, thank you, Assistant Attorney General. Commissioner Salazar Henry, would you like to go next?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that Commissioner Tircio Lopez, Vice Chair Jeremy Vesbach, work with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish staff, the Director and Chief of Fisheries, and whoever else they include, to finalize the agreement to transfer ownership of Laguna del Campo property as per SJR 2.
Second.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Henry and Commissioner Bates. Director Mike Sloan, may we please have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Salazar Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Vice Chair Vesbach,
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you. Last but not least, during the executive session, I would like to make a motion that the commissioners use a draft form performance evaluation to proceed at our next commission meeting, which is on May 21st. That form will be, for want of a better word, a blueprint for our discussions to create a mid-year evaluation discussion with the director, Michael Sloan. However, in addition to that form, which is the blueprint, the commissioners will each present to me as the chair of the commission their issues or priority of issues of policy, goals, and achievements that they would like to see addressed by the director. I will take each of those from each commissioner individually, and I will work with Commissioner Jimmy Bates and Commissioner Tircio Lopez, and we will then present those to Director Mike Sloan, who can understand and be prepared for our discussion at the May 21st meeting. And also, for the record, an annual performance evaluation should occur as well, not just mid-year. So the annual goal, our goal at this time, our last scheduled commission meeting is currently scheduled for November 15th. I don't believe we have one in December. And so our goal is to have a final evaluation in November or before the end of the calendar year. So that is my motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Director Mike Sloan, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Salazar Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Vice Chair Vesbach,
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So I believe we are now at the conclusion of our commission meeting. It is an action item to adjourn. And is there any discussion about our next meeting? I believe it is May 21st, which is a Friday. And I hope that we will have all 6 commissioners and possibly a 7th commissioner by that meeting. I don't know, but we will look forward to hearing from the governor regarding that 7th appointment. Is there any other discussion before we wrap up for the day? Yes, Commissioner Kramer.
Is there any plan to do an in-person meeting at that point?
Excellent question. I did ask the governor's office about it. At this point in time, the answer is no. I know that we have had a number of members of the public send us emails. I think thank you for bringing that up. At this point in time, it's going to continue to be virtual. But as our state continues to remain healthy and get better, and our numbers are going down, the vaccinations, et cetera, in the country, yeah, we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see. But at this point in time, it's virtual unless otherwise directed. Director, do you agree, or is there anything else you want to add?
Nope, that would have been my response as well.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Commissioner Bates, Vice Chair, Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
You took my bait. Thank you. Thank you, Roberta. Roll call, please. Director Sloan.
Commissioner Salazar Henry.
Yes.
Commissioner Kramer.
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Vice Chair Vesbach.
Yes.
Chair Salazar Hickey.
Absolutely, yes.
Madam Chair, you're adjourned.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.